some kind of crib.
Do you mind?
Crib. No, not at all. Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Taklan. Taklan. Daisy. Daisy. No, she's over there. Daisy. Paging Daisy. Takalani. Right at the back. Okay. I think we should start. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mukelani Dimba. I am responsible for communication and education at the Information Regulator. For this session today, I will serve as the program director. Before we start, may I invite the minister and the chairperson and the deputy minister to join me on the stage, please. And Linnell, please. Thank you. Wow, well, happy International Data Privacy Day, everybody. Oh, you don't look happy. Come on, this is data privacy. It's very exciting. It's a very exciting subject. Interestingly enough, tomorrow will be the Chinese New Year, so allow me to say Happy New Year. It's the year of the snake. 2025 is the year of the snake in China. I don't know what that means. Don't ask me, please. Everybody, let me formally welcome you all to the session today. I won't be like those moderators that abuse airtime to the detriment of everybody else in the room. But mine really is to say thank you for joining us for this session. We will start off with some remarks from the chairperson of the Information Regulator, followed by the minister and the deputy minister. But before we do that, I would like to invite Linnell Bagwandin, who is the Group Company Secretary and head of the Global Secretariat at Process and Naspers. Naspers are our hosts today, so it is appropriate that I allow Linnell to welcome all of us to this session. Over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think the moderators already set the tone, but I'd like to reiterate, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed guests, honourable ministers and deputy ministers, and of course the chairperson of the Information Regulator, brilliant panelists, we look forward to you, and last but not least, the learners. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As mentioned, I'm here in my capacity not just as the Group Company Secretary, but also the Information Officer of Naspers and Process, and most importantly, representing our Naspers CEO, Puti, who unfortunately, due to circumstances, couldn't be here today personally, to note the significant occasion. And what is that? Today is the 19th Annual International Data Protection Day, highlighting the need essentially for privacy and data protection, safeguarding the information in our increasingly digital world. The dialogue we engage in today, we hope, is focused on the promotion and the protection of children's privacy online. This carries even more significance when we consider the vulnerabilities faced by children in the digital age. A UNICEF report recently indicated that the majority of children have access to the internet. Almost half of them access it without their parental consent. 25% of that actually invite friends that are not part of their contact list to their circle of people that they then subsequently share information, including photographs and videos. This is deeply alarming and deeply disheartening, especially somebody who is a mother of a young child. As technology rapidly evolves, children have become the most active digital platform users, making them particularly susceptible to online threats. So, in this drive towards inclusivity and digital growth specifically for the youth, we have to be reminded by the equal responsibility we owe to ensuring their protection. As Naspers, we're deeply proud to be part of this initiative and to collaborate with the Information Regulator on such a much-needed conversation, not here just in South Africa, but also globally. So today's event seeks to commend what has already been achieved in data protection and also a call to action. And how do we plan to do that? We plan to highlight the collaboration between the public and the private sector to protect children's rights. But we're also here to engage in an open dialogue and to initiate strategies that we hope will be enabled to continue to raise awareness about safeguarding children's personal information. We also recognize that the privacy of children is a collective responsibility, and that one that requires the equal commitment from all of us. So we believe that today marks a major step in this direction, and it also marks a step of the beginning of ongoing conversations, further collaborations in bringing together key stakeholders to forge strong partnerships into driving the efforts forward. We hope that at the end of the day, we will have some concrete actions, plans, and strategies, and more importantly, a commitment to each entity to continue advocating and working towards protecting children's data and ensuring privacy is respected both online and offline. So really, again, to reiterate, I hope that we use this day to confirm our commitment to data protection and privacy to create a safer digital environment. And I really hope that it is a productive and enjoyable day. And on that note, I'm going to hand back to you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linel. It is my honor and privilege to introduce the chairperson of the Information Regulator, Advocate Pensik Tlakula. She was born in the dusty streets of Everton, and no, I won't do that. Please, chairperson. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mukelen. I was so worried that you'll also say which church, when was I baptized, and which church, and so on. Let me take this opportunity to also welcome everyone, the minister, the deputy minister, and Linel, and our special guests there. Children, Banabak, Dumelang. No, say it loud, Dumelang. We are so happy that you are here. This is your day. So I would like to acknowledge your presence. The Minister of Basic Education, Honorable Gwarube, Member of Parliament, the Deputy Minister for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disability, Honorable Mapaseka Steve Litsike, members of the regulator, my colleagues, the CEO of the regulator, Mr. Musalanyana Musala, and your team, the Group Company Secretary and Head of Global Company Secretariat for Naspers and Process, Ms. Linel Bagwadin, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to also acknowledge the presence of Professor Snail, who started the regulator with us in 2006. As a 2016 as a member of the regulator. You're welcome. Our esteemed panelists. The Information Regulator is delighted to co-host the South African part of this global celebration of the right to privacy as it relates to the protection of personal information. We thank our colleagues at Process and Naspers for extending a hand of partnership so that we can mark this important day in the work of the Information Regulator of South Africa. However, most importantly, we thank you all for making the time to come and celebrate this day with us as we consider the importance of data privacy for young people. I also have to recognize the presence of Monica from Amsterdam, because we are meeting here today because of the conversation, an informal conversation that we had at the Global Privacy, what is it called? Assembly, Global Privacy Assembly in Jersey, a small island in the UK, where we, during lunch, we said, how can we work together? And that conversation has culminated in this occasion, and I think we need to give a round of applause. Thank you. Monica, who's coming to South Africa for the first time, and she says she's not intending to leave. You're welcome to our beautiful country. I'm not going to talk about our mandate as the regulator. You know who we are, and we know that we are a human rights body that is responsible for two rights: the right of access to information in terms of the protection, the promotion of access to information, and the right to privacy as it relates to the protection of personal information in terms of the protection of the POPIA, as we call it, the Protection of Personal Information Act. The student out there, you're going to write a test after this, so you must listen very carefully. Two acts, POPIA and PAIA, Promotion of Access to Information, and the Protection of Personal Information Act. So what we're concerned about today is the presence of children online. And according to the 2023 report of the UN Secretary General on the status of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, children account for an estimated 1/3 of internet users around the world. The report points out that children are becoming more digitally connected from a very early age, often having their first experience with digital technologies before they turn 2 years old. And those of you who have young children, you know that you are now using machines to babysit your children. Children of 2 years, instead of playing and being engaged, you give them so that the iPads can babysit them. So this is the problem that we are confronted with. And personal information and the processing thereof is the bloodline for digital life. Like the rest of us, children pay with their personal information to be able to participate in the digital spaces as netizens, as you call yourselves, isn't it? You are netizens. At the back there? Yes. As the regulator, we are concerned about the low levels of awareness about the right to privacy or about POPIA among young people. Since 2022, the regulator, working with other partners, such as the Human Sciences Research Council, has conducted public opinion surveys to test the level of awareness about the right to privacy and POPIA. In all 4 installments of these studies, young people between the ages of 18 and 24 consistently show low levels of awareness about the right to privacy and POPIA. While the awareness levels are generally low at 42% of all respondents, young people only contributed 5% points towards the rate of this awareness. Given such low levels of awareness about the right to privacy and POPIA among young people, the question arises as to whether children and young people are enabled to make the informed choices and the correct judgment calls on the trade-offs between protecting their personal information and being able to take part in the cyber world. If children and young people's participation in the cyber world can be traced back to their real lives, then this raises risks that need to be carefully studied and mitigated against. Everyone has been preoccupied with the rights of children online, and I won't bore you with all the jurisprudence. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights have also weighed in on this subject, together with the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. They've also looked at this aspect, the UN as well. So, what are the challenges? Are the legal frameworks sufficient? Are they enough? In addition to regional and international legal instruments, a number of states, regionally and globally, have adopted legal frameworks to protect people's personal information. South Africa is one of the 36 African countries that have done so. However, there remains a question on whether these laws and legal frameworks are fit for purpose in the context of innovative technological development, where novel and complex legal issues related to intellectual property rights, digital security, privacy and identity, and self-sovereignty are likely to arise. This is going to be the question for the first panel in this dialogue today. Further compounding the challenges brought on by the fact that data protection laws may not be fit for purpose in a rapidly changing technological environment is the fact that even the existing legal frameworks or children's rights does not mention technological changes and does not respond directly to the novel challenges presented by new technologies and digital revolution. Another challenge is consent and age verification. And in addition to outdated laws is the issue regarding consent for the processing of personal information for purposes of participating in the cyberspace. However, let us first consider how the challenge of consent arises. Most digital platforms require the creation of accounts and even avatars to enable participation in these platforms. Regarding the children, the question becomes who gets to create an account for a child? This is important because whoever creates the account will also exercise consent rights in terms of the processing of personal information. Unless these two are delinked, the creation of an account and the control of consent rights, minors can be enabled to create their digital twin and therefore control consent decisions. This will run counter to internationally recognized norms around consent management. Most data protection laws provide that only adults can give consent for the processing of personal information. However, studies show that online platforms are generally not very good at ensuring that a legally competent adult is the person behind the screen seeking access to an online service or product. We all know, you will know, when you want to access, something pops up, are you over the age of 18? And you just click and say yes, even if you are not. So that's a big problem. I see you can identify with that. I can see some of you smiling because I know at the back there, that's what you do. So now, considering these challenges, what are the possible interventions by data protection authorities? Considering the challenges discussed above, it is incumbent on all role players to join hands to develop the necessary possible solutions to deal with threats to children's rights, children's privacy rights online. As a data protection authority, the regulator may consider issuing guidelines requiring the developers and operators of digital platforms to build onto their standard operating procedures, child right impact assessments, for instances where the personal information of children is processed. We may also require the digital platforms to invest in better techniques for determining whether a child has reached the age of consent to data collection and processing. However, there is a complication with age verification and determination systems because these tools or systems rely on gathering data about children to make or confirm an age determination. We are keen to discourage over-processing of personal information. The regulator promotes the full adoption of privacy by design approach. This means that the technical and organizational measures designed to protect children's personal information on the digital platforms must be configured from conceptualization, design, and implementation phases to limit the processing of personal information of children. The regulator also encourages responsible parties to adopt privacy enhancing technologies or PETs as an enabler or a tool for achieving data protection by design and default in order to reduce the privacy risk for children. Lastly, we are also keen to explore opportunities to work with other strategic partners to cause other policies, laws, and regulations and school syllabuses to be updated to provide more awareness of the new complexities brought about by the new technologies. This is the reason why we have invited here today the Minister of Basic Education and the Deputy Minister for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, and the private sector to explore what can be done working together to protect and promote children's privacy rights online and safety online generally. This is consistent with the findings from our public opinion survey which showed that 65% of young people 16 years to 19 years who participated in the survey indicate that they would like to receive more information on their right to privacy. Different mechanisms were suggested as preferred platforms to receive such information. This includes the use of various social media platforms or at school through awareness programs or through inclusion of the right to privacy in the school curriculum. I was having a discussion with the minister and the deputy minister that we have to look at whether the school syllabus and curriculum is still fit for purpose. For instance, I know that there is a subject called life orientation. And going forward, we then have to look at how in life orientation must be transformed so that we can include the safety of children online in the syllabus. And it's something that we'll explore with the minister as we go forward. So I'm looking forward to the rich deliberations that we'll have during the course of the dialogue. And thank you very much once again for gracing our occasion.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I'm quite privileged today because I get to break with protocol. You see, the minister and the deputy minister are new in government, so they're not yet used to Your Excellency, to... DM is giving me a look, as if to say, who told you so? No, thank you so much, Chairperson. I'm going to speed through the program because we want to build as much time as we possibly can for an engagement between the learners in the room and the leaders on the platform and the leaders in the room. I used to be an advocate of human rights a long time ago, and I know what is called ambush advocacy. So students, there's a deputy minister here, there's a minister here. If you feel you have some things to say, this is an opportunity. And now, from the dusty streets of the Eastern Cape, please, Minister, over to you.
They were dusty. They still are dusty, but the Eastern Cape is indeed the home of legends. They don't say that for nothing. A very good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Program Director, Deputy Minister, the Chairperson of the Information Regulator, esteemed guests, and our wonderful learners. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really, really good to be with you today. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Chairperson for extending this invite to participate in this dialogue. I think it's a very, very important issue that the rest of the world is really grappling with. And I suppose many of you would have thought it odd, considering that you would have probably been reading during the December holidays the legal challenges between the organization that the chair leads and my department. But in conversations the chair and I have had, it has become quite clear that both of us are really committed to making sure that at the end of the day, we protect the children who are in the school system, and her organization's role is to make sure that we are doing that well, even in this kind of digital age that we are living in. And so as those people who are committed to doing this and doing it well, this is why we're able to find one another, because ultimately that's what brings us together. We are living, ladies and gentlemen, we are living in an age that is defined by unprecedented technological advancements that are moving society closer than ever before to becoming what we are calling essentially a surveillance society. With every click, with every swipe, with every search, we leave behind digital footprints, traces of our lives, our preferences, our behaviors that are tracked, analyzed, and stored in databases that we may not be aware of. Today, we're not just only merely users of technology, we're the product of it. The rapid digitalization of every aspect of our existence, from communication to commerce to education, presents significant opportunities, and we can't pretend it doesn't. But at the same time, it also really does present significant risks, particularly to our children. And so these profiles that are used to predict and influence in the near future may not even just only manipulate behavior, but they may have been raising some profound concerns, as the chair says, about privacy, about autonomy, and ultimately about the safety of children. In this environment of hyper-surveillance and data exploitation, children are particularly vulnerable. Their online activities, whether they are learning, whether they're playing, whether they're socializing, are meticulously monitored, often without their knowledge or their consent. The digital platforms that they engage in are not just neutral spaces. They are carefully curated environments to capture their attention and maximize their engagement. As children navigate this online world, they're exposed to multiple risks. Number one, invasive data tracking, which was mentioned earlier. Exposure to harmful content that may be inappropriate for their age. They are also exposed to cyberbullying and misinformation, which are rampant online. They are also exposed to predatory behavior. Criminals and criminal elements exploit digital spaces to target particularly children and groom vulnerable children for exploitation. And so in light of all of these things, it's important that as governments, as parents, as children in the room, as educators, and as civil society, that we establish strong safeguards to protect and promote children's rights in the digital space. I think gone are the days where lawmakers have to be very myopic in the way in which they look at their work, that we've got to be a lot more expansive in realizing that we are existing in a digital world, and therefore solutions, whether legal, whether policy interventions, need to be targeted and relevant to the kind of world that we are living in now. Otherwise, we risk being left behind, we risk leaving gaps in the system, and we risk exposing children to these kind of harmful risks that I've outlined above. One of the most concerning aspects of this technological evolution is the influence of social media platforms, such as TikToks, where the algorithm-driven content can reinforce particular ideologies, particular values, particular behaviors. As I indicated before, we are in digital spaces. These are not neutral digital spaces. They can either be reflecting behaviors that are carefully curated, tracking your preferences, children, tracking the things that you like, and reinforcing particular ideologies. It is not an accident or a coincidence that we are living in a particularly deeply polarized world. It is polarized because often of the influence of some of these digital platforms. The kind of online hate that we are seeing is no accident. It didn't happen to us. It has been years in the making, and children remain at the center of it. And so if as policymakers, as lawmakers, we are not mindful to these things, and as regulators of information, like the Information Regulator, we are not aware of these things, we risk leaving our children behind. If left unchecked, these platforms can become tools of ideological indoctrination. I don't want to make examples around the world. I think all of us know the dangers, and we have seen what is happening around the world. And as I said, these things are not happening in a vacuum. They're happening very much because and very much with the aid of particularly online platforms. And these things risk unstitching the very fiber of societies if we leave them unchecked. And so while the conversation on children's rights online often centers around privacy and misinformation, we must not also overlook at the issue around safety, particularly online child pornography, sexual abuse material. And children in the room, to our learners at the back, it is not because we're trying to make you uncool when we say we want to monitor the activities that happen online. But predators are not misinformed. They know your behaviors, they know your interests, and they go and find you on the platforms that you are at. And that is the danger. And often I think as society, as communities, as teachers, as schools, as school communities, we have to be mindful of these things. And so we might ask ourselves, as I conclude, what is to be done then? Well, I think there are a number of things, Program Director. I think number one, we have to make sure that there are stronger regulations and stronger enforcement. It's important that government doesn't just work alone, but it works with various experts in the field, people who know this kind of work. Some of the international partners that you have here in the room, we've got to be able to make use of people who know this kind of work and see how then it can influence the way in which we develop laws, the way in which we develop policies. We also need to make sure that there's a lot more digital literacy and education, often particularly in school communities. It is often the learners who are leading the revolution around digital literacy, because for too long we've left the educator behind. How can an educator be a protector of children when they themselves have been left outside of the conversation? When they are not being brought into the conversation around digital literacy, what is to be looked out for, and how they can play a protective role. Number three, I think partnerships. And again, partnerships like, for instance, between government, regulators, partnerships between departments, it's important. Partnerships with experts in the field. While politicians like to pretend that they know everything, trust me, they don't. And in order for us to be able to do our work and do it well, we need to have partnerships with people who will know what it is that we are looking to solve for. And then, of course, legal reforms. But I'm always wary of saying legal reforms must lead the conversation, because laws can exist, but if they exist in a vacuum, without the partnership, without the education, without the cultural change, they become laws, and laws that just exist for compliance sake. We have to move beyond just wanting to legally comply. We have to think about how do we create a safe environment, particularly for children in the online space. Because ultimately, Chair, we can't also leave children locked out of opportunities which are presented by technology. So we must create digital ecosystems that are safe, that are inclusive, that are empowering, that ensure that children can fully participate in the digital economy while their rights are being safeguarded. That, for me, is actually the goal. Making sure that children are included in the digital revolution, but while doing so, ensuring that their rights are protected and that we keep them safe. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in this rapidly evolving digital landscape, we cannot afford to be passive spectators. We must be proactive in shaping policies and interventions. And I've heard the call from the chairperson of the Information Regulator about saying, how do we partner and make sure that even in your curriculum, there are places where we are talking about digital safety, we are talking about the consent and information and the protection of information of children, even in your curriculum, to empower children so that as they become active participants in the digital world, they knowing that there are safeguards that exist for them to be able to use. So thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this dialogue. It is incredibly useful and informative for me, and I look forward to interacting with all of you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Minister makes a very important point regarding the issue of digital literacy and education. And Minister, the point that you touched on how young people get influenced through digital platforms is an issue that, as a regulator, we're quite concerned about. That is why we are currently building a practice on information integrity. Within the information integrity space, there is this concern around foreign information manipulation and what's it called? It's FIMI. The short word is FIMI, the abbreviation, but it's foreign information manipulation and influence. Basically, this is when certain threat actors use platforms to influence young people to adopt certain ideological positions. And this is enabled by what is called digital crumbs. Remember now, all of these platforms that we are using, as you are using the platform or as we are using the device keeps on dropping digital crumbs. Things such as your location, where you are, things such as your IP addresses. And those are the digital crumbs that are used by threat actors to then influence young people to adopt certain ideological positions. So that's why digital literacy and education is very important, because it will enable young people to be able to pick up these instances as they occur, to enable young people to be able to identify misinformation and disinformation and not spread them further, because that's another difficulty that we see within the space of information integrity. Thank you so much, Minister, for those insightful comments. Now, the next speaker, the Deputy Minister for Women, Youth, and People with Disabilities, is a personal hero of mine. In the interest of protection of personal information, DM, I won't say where you and I connect, but just to tell a very short story, to say the Deputy Minister happened to be in Washington, D.C., and I happened to be in the same area. We were not traveling together, we just happened to be in the same area. And we were having a number of meetings which involved or included the Deputy Minister. Suddenly the Deputy Minister disappeared. She wasn't the Deputy Minister then, but she disappeared during lunch. And we kept on saying, where is Mapaseka? Where is Steve? And no one knew. And suddenly our phones were blowing up on Twitter. We started seeing feed. Steve Mapaseka Letsike was out in the streets of Washington leading a march. With a loudspeaker leading a march. I hope, Deputy Minister, you don't lose that fire. This is what makes us love you so much. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Program Director. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that he will expose me that way.
What was the march about?
You know, I've always contested, Chairperson, I've always contested why would we have a Africa-US summit? Because it was, if I remember correctly, that summit, and one president called 54 presidents to fly over to meet with him. It doesn't make sense. If you understand it from which perspective I'm coming from. So that march was outside the White House that he's referring to. So thank you so much, Program Director, Mr. Dimba. Our gracious host, Advocacy Tlakula. There are many stories, both with the Program Director and as well with the Chairperson, but I will spare those details because I could speak a lot about things that have happened in Gambia, but I'll spare those details for that matter. But we really do come a long way, and in the human rights sector, championing the rights of persons. And yet here we are coming again to focus on the data privacy, and I'm really quite excited with this invitation. Minister of Basic Education, Ms. Siviwe, sibonge kakhulu, because I'm excited to see the young people there at the back who are the hype of this event for me. So Minister and I share a constituency because in the ministry I'm responsible for youth, and indeed basic education have to empower young people until they leave that system. So I'm really excited to be sharing this platform with you, Minister. Of course, also to Ms. Linnell, Group Company Secretary, as well as Head of Global Secretariat of Naspers. Thank you so much. The stakeholders, government officials, civil society, interest groups, and of course to the young people, the great leaders of tomorrow in different sectors, we say greetings to you. Colleagues and friends, I am honored to really represent the ministry in the presidency responsible for women, youth, and persons with disability in this important dialogue as we celebrate the 2025 International Data Privacy Day under the theme, Put Privacy First. Yesterday, I put on my social media about this event, and the title was For Good or For Worse. And of course, it sparked debates on social. Some others who were not brave enough wrote to me in the inbox. And I really do read these messages because you get great insight. And people share their stories about how much they have not given consent, and they find their information in the public platform. And others shared positive stories about what it means to have access to information and consent to their privacy being out there. So, advocate, this dialogue is important as we, even as a department, implement many strategies, and I want to highlight one that makes reference to the NSP on gender-based violence and femicide, which its effort can only thrive when all society, in all its interaction and with all stakeholders, really rally to protect the rights of vulnerable groups, particularly children. The proliferation of online information does not only serve education or entertainment purpose, but also social interaction and entertainment, which introduces unintended consequences because least access to information brings opportunities. It also exposes us to risks, particularly those most vulnerable. Our NSP really respond to the data breaches, online exploitation, and privacy violation. And we see it a lot, and Minister was referring to this, that many young people, particularly children, are being lured to harmful practices and spaces. And this ultimately goes into the work that we deal with predominantly around gender-based violence, and all manner of abuses have morphed into a globe-trotting digital persona without a passport. And our interaction must be the way where we adapt to the character of what really data privacy really constitute, or how it's characterized. The dialogue we're going to have and the interactions that we will have are important and require that we always put in mind what are the opportunities that lies ahead of us around always protecting, and the key word, always protecting the rights of all persons, including vulnerable groups, to ensure that they too enjoy the hard-won freedom of constitutional democracy to life, human dignity, freedom, security of persons, and privacy, as articulated in our Bill of Rights. So I find it very apt, Advocate Tlakula, that the Information Regulator has chosen to dedicate this dialogue to the protection of children's rights online, particularly as we have seen the proliferation of online criminal activity, such as the creation and distribution of child pornography, cyberbullying, identity theft, cyber stalking, and unethical targeted marketing, among other things. Just recently, we witnessed the arrest of suspects who appeared to be a link to an international syndicate in possession of and distributing of content right here in South Africa, in our doorstep. In fact, when I was reading that article just a few days ago, I just realized, because it's in the same vicinity as my area. I'm in Midrand, and this person was arrested in Midrand, for that matter. Stock of information that they possessed. So I must express upfront that our greatest challenge in these crimes are committed online, which is an environment that is not subject to traditional borders, and thereby requires our government and our institutions supporting democracy and all stakeholders to adopt and operate in like fashion. So as we take this dialogue forward into concrete actions, our interventions must be rooted in international cooperation. As the content we access online, the people we meet on social media, and even the platforms we use often originate from all corners of the globe. A purely South African-centric approach will not serve our purpose, as we require to look outward and collaborate with international community. If we are to secure the rights and protection of our children online, as a large volume of content that is accessible does not originate within the confinement of our borders. So I must emphasize that this dialogue should not be the last, and that we must perhaps expand its reach to bring in more international and local partners to drive our conversation on how we are to ensure the safety of our children is connected to the world. The rise of information age through the introduction of personal computers in the 70s ushered in a rapid shift for traditional industries to an economic base of creation, storage, processing, and sharing of information, thereby introducing a novel and rapidly evolving set of dynamics which have influenced how people interact, how they learn and entertain themselves. So we therefore must raise awareness about the importance of protection of our information and the content we access that is increasingly connected to the rest of the world. And I'm saying this because constantly when we speak about rights, we have to look at what is it that we do to safeguard those rights, but also what is it that we do to promote those rights and the rights of the vulnerable groups, children, members of the LGBTI community, persons with disability, women in all their diversity in this digital age. So the promotion and protection of children's rights and all vulnerable groups are important now more than ever, as children are growing up in a world that is increasingly more connected than before. We are all connected, right? And we have smartphones, right? We need to use them responsibly. And that is the message we should be ushering to children. So our children are stewards of the future, Minister. We can't block it in any way. And we have a duty as a whole of society to ensure that the digital space children access is safe, empowering, and respectful. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children reminds us that every child has a right to privacy, which includes the protection of their personal data and ensuring that they can grow and learn in an environment free from exploitation and harm. As the primary responsibility of safeguarding our children vests with parents, guardians, caregivers, and also with the basic education system, where they spend most of their time, these actors are at the coalface of our effort to safeguarding the space for our children. The reality of what happens online is sobering and requires us to be intentional to protecting the rights of the future of our children. May platforms collect and use children's data, or many platforms collect and use children's data for profit, often without clear consent or understanding from the children or guardians. The most pervasive of these profit-mongering tactics is digital advertising to children, and both advocate and minister spoke about it. You see pop-up ads in gaming apps and social media. Ads that target children are subtle and yet transmit information to young minds that may be harmful. And because of this nimble finger enter and exit screens at a pace of which Olympic sprinters, the evidence disappears before parents can lay their eyes on the items. Studies demonstrate that human development, critical thinking, and impulse control in waves between 5 and 9. And I think it was Advocate that says, what are we giving our children? And at what age are we exposing them? They are smart. They are incredible. So we need to know, how do we move with the pace, even from psychosocial, emotional, but also physical kind of interaction. So targeting children in marketing during this phase means we are directly altering how they process information and interact in society. We are exhibiting powerful means of control before the full development have taken place. Leaving them subsequently to making decisions is in a later stage that imprinted on their brains at early age. The effects vary, ranging from increasing obesity rates by advertising addictive fast foods, and we know the fast food interaction. It affects children's nutrition. This interacts with health. But there are many other things that interact with all their other development areas that we have to think about. So I'm raising all of these things because it's quite important. I want to just highlight the issues around cyberbullying, identity theft, as well as online surveillance also threaten the mental and emotional well-being of young users. We have undoubtedly so all witnessed one or the other young person who have committed suicide on the behest of online bullying and attack. We've seen it, too many stories. The question then is, which interventions will make the most impact? First, education is key. Parents, educators, and children themselves must be equipped with knowledge and tools to navigate the online world safely. So I agree with advocacy approach to you, Honorable Minister. The life orientation subject offers us an opportunity to actually integrate the much needed education towards the children. So the digital literacy programs can teach children about the value of their personal information and how to protect it. Further, certain countries such as Cuba have recognized the importance of media and information literacy in their digital age and have engaged in the efforts to promote these skills. Cuba has collaborated with UNESCO Minister on projects aiming at developing policies, strategies, and capacity building for media and information literacy. So we must engage ongoingly so, both domestically, but also through our international collaboration to enhance South Africa's ability to navigate the complex information landscape in the modern world. It will benefit our effort to teach our children how to consume online content. The second part, stronger policies and regulations are essential. Government, tech companies, institutions such as the Information Regulator, and all stakeholders must collaborate to enforce data protection laws that prioritizes children's rights. We've seen initiatives everywhere else, and this effort that our Information Regulator is embarking on, we stand with and we support it wholeheartedly. This will serve as a critical starting point that will move our country forward. The third area, technology must be designed with children in mind. And Minister was making that effort when she said, include children when we design the technology approaches. This means building platforms that prioritizes privacy by default, using ethical data practices, and creating safeguards amongst harmful content and interaction. And lastly, we must amplify children's voices. Too often, the conversations about data privacy excludes those it affects, the children themselves. Let us create a space where we can express ourselves and allow children to express themselves. They can express their concerns, contribute to shaping the digital future that will be inherited. Nothing about children without children. Today, as we reflect on this the importance of data privacy, let us renew our commitment to protecting the most vulnerable members of our society. Every step will take us forward in safeguarding children's privacy. And that step takes us towards ensuring the dignity, safety, and rights of the interconnectedness of the world. So together we can build a digital environment that is not only innovative and inclusive, but also safe and respectful for every children's fundamental rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, DM. DM says nothing about children without children. It's as if DM was in my briefing session last week with the chairperson who said, who's coming to this meeting? And I started reading through the list, and chairperson said, no. More than half of that room should be children. And that was right. It's a right call. DM, you make a number of important points, but the one I want to just highlight is the issue of the international approach. DM says the South Africa-only approach is not enough. One of the difficulties or one of the challenges we're dealing with as the information regulator is the idea of different rules for different regions insofar as the operations of digital platforms. One can almost say it's some kind of digital apartheid where digital platforms have certain rules which change depending on where you are in the world. Certain protections are available to certain citizens depending on where they are, and it's something that the regulator is most concerned about. That's why the issue of an international approach becomes very important. We do hope that the government, minister and deputy minister, will assist us perhaps through the G20 process to try and introduce some kind of common rules and common standards, particularly on the issue of ensuring privacy online. It's a challenge that we've identified, and hopefully there will be partnerships that we can establish to deal with this challenge. Ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, I am speeding through the program because we really need to hear from young people themselves. And the minister did indicate that she would like to hear some perspectives from young people before she leaves. She had gracefully, she had very, what's the word I want to use, generously given us until 2 o'clock because she has to run to another engagement. But before she does so, perhaps we can allow a presentation that will be led by Article 12 Web Rangers so that Minister can get a sense of what it is that young people are doing in this area, and then we can release the Minister. With those words, I would like to thank the panel. You've set us off on a very good starting point. All of what we're going to discuss from now on really will be informed and influenced by the insights that you shared with us. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to invite the first panel. This panel is going to be looking at existing and possible policy gaps and interventions that can be considered in enhancing children's rights. The panel is going to be led through a presentation by, that's fine, by Khumulimo Puwe and Paramile Madonsela. Please come forward. And the discussants will be Professor Sizwe Snell Gamtuse and Mr. Lucian Pierce. Please, may I invite them to come to the floor. Are we going to need microphones for the panelists? Yes. Oh, they're mic'd. I'm sorry, I'm very old school like that. I was hoping to see you carrying umbobo. You taking this off? Yes. Okay. Please. Do you have a presentation? No? Oh, okay. Brilliant. Excellent. All right. Indeed. Yes. Paramile, welcome. Khumulimo, welcome. Please, who's going to start?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Minister, Chair, Deputy Minister, and colleagues in the room. I acknowledge you all. My name is Paramile Madonsela. I work at Media Monitoring Africa. And the work that I primarily do that is focused on really today's event is around trying to bring a hard balance between the promotion and protection of children's rights in the media, including social media. And the work that is particularly useful for today's discussion is the work we do with digital rights and children's rights in the media, called the Web Rangers Program. And so the Web Rangers Program is really about empowering young people in schools on how they can lead successful lives in the digital world, how they can lead and thrive in the digital world. And some of the Web Rangers are here today from Okoli House, as well as Khumulemo. And really, the Web Rangers Program is really about empowering young people with digital and media literacy skills, as all of the speakers have mentioned, how critical it is if we want to have young people thrive online. And we've trained over the last 8 years, we've trained over 10,000 young people across the country on digital and media literacy skills. But we've also trained parents as well as teachers, SGBs, RCLs in schools. And so we try to look at a holistic approach in terms of empowering the young person so that they are able to thrive and lead in the digital world. On the 20th of December last year, we launched a report, 2 reports that we have. I think colleagues in the room have copies of them. Sure, thank you. And when we were still preparing for the report, I learned a few stats that were really shocking and concerning to me as a child rights activist. A little did you know, is that by the time a child turns 13 years old, about 72 million data points have been collected about them. So that's a huge, the scale of surveillance is just, it's scary, right? And also, a decade ago, it wasn't even a thing, but right now it is. And so we see that with the advancements of technology and the digital world, young people are continuing to be online. We cannot run away from it. But the threat that it poses to the promotion and protection of children's rights in the media and social media are real, and we cannot and no longer can ignore them, right? And so it is against that backdrop that Media Monitoring Africa, together with Article 12 members who are children, launched 2 reports that are really aimed at acknowledging and hearing children's voices, concerns, and also hopes in the digital world, and how they want to, how they see and understand privacy and trust in the digital world, but also what they hope to see through recommendations of how they can, how adults, policymakers, government can ensure the protection and promotion of their rights to privacy in the digital world. And so I'm going to hand over to Khumulemo, who's going to talk to us about some key findings in the report. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Oh. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Khumulemo Bowe, a 17-year-old from Soweto. I attend St. Matthew's Private Secondary School, and I'm an Article 12 member. Basically, Article 12 is a program inside the Web Ranger program designed at specifically dealing with ICT-related policies. Over the last 3 years, I've dealt with a lot of those policies, and I'm glad that what the minister said, what the advocate said, and what the deputy minister said are all of the recommendations and solutions and submissions we've been putting as the Article 12 towards governments and regulators. On the 2 reports that we worked with, funny enough, on the day that we were supposed to work on the one for privacy, I read that in the United States, there were meta platforms. They were enforcing a rule that if you were to onboard on that platform and you're under the age of 18, automatically your account would be private. And then when we did the study, we found that in South Africa, it gives you an option, making you choose whether you want to be public or private. So there was insufficient privacy protections that we saw. And what the Deputy Minister said, that it leads to a digital apartheid, whereby one section of the world is given that option to be secured and safe, while the other is led to figure things out for themselves. Distrust of digital services. We find that many of us children, we do use those platforms, yet we are not fully confident that we trust them to protect us fully. We are not sure whether how much safety will we get from those platforms. Yes, I want to be on Instagram and TikTok every day, 24/7, but I'm not sure whether I will be safe on those platforms. There was a desire for control. If we were to control who gets to interact with us more safely and securely, even if I do have a private account, people can still see my name, things about me that I would like to remain private. So they're forcing us to be more restrictive instead of being more protected in some essence. Of those 2 reports, we found that all young people that were interviewed or surveyed, they view privacy as something important, even though it might not be provided in the way they hope that it will come to them. But they view it as something that it's important, that they need to have. Privacy is seen as a human right and privilege that everyone should enjoy. Not only that you should be in a certain part of the country or part of the world, that you should get to be that you get to be protected or have privacy. Privacy is the freedom to be yourself without intrusions from others. Just being you in your own space, whether online or offline. You deserve to have that private bubble of your own that you can express, be yourself fully. Privacy enables personal boundaries that give control. Privacy enables relationships we can control, including how much we want to see others and how much we want to be seen by others. Yes, we might have a lot of teenage influencers, but there are also teenagers out there who prefer to remain protected and have personal boundaries around themselves. Privacy gives young people safety, security, and comfort. I believe everyone, including myself and the Macaulay House young ladies back then, that in as much as we want to be exposed to the internet and online space, we want to be protected while we are there. We want to have comfort that I know that I'm on this platform safely. No information of mine will be leaked. Data breaches, things like that won't happen. I believe I speak on behalf of all young people in South Africa that are connected to the internet when I said what we as young people want is default privacy settings for minors. What's happening in the US should and can be able to happen in South Africa or any other part of the world. Transparency and consent, reduced data tracking, and child-inclusive designs. When I was listening to the first keynote speakers, everything I wanted to say, they said it before me. Everything. The importance of digital literacy, how everyone should be able to be digital literate at a certain age or a certain point in life. The importance of those things. How it will help build more privacy and include more privacy for everyone out there to be able to feel secure and live a very nice life on the online world. Thank you.
That was brilliant, Khumulimo. They may have said it all before you, but when it comes from you, it has much more weight. I know that I don't want to run into trouble with the minister's team, but I want to give an opportunity to the girls at the back. Does anyone want to add something to what Khumulimo presented today? Anyone? Or a question to the minister and the deputy minister and the chairperson of the regulator? Yes. Can you please give her a microphone? Oh, please, can you run to the stage? The chair wants to see you. Run quickly, the minister has to leave. You have the floor. Yeah, just right there.
Afternoon, everyone. This is more of a question dedicated to you, Deputy. You spoke about apps, if I'm not mistaken, and there was a time, if I'm sure, when there was an app called Likey for teenagers under the age of 13. It's like a substitute for TikTok. Now, I know that you say that there should be more defaults for children, but I want to know, how will that stop predators from being able to mask themselves as children? Because that was kind of the situation that happened with Likey. So I kind of want to know what the adults are planning to do with that. Because if I'm being honest, I don't think it was taken as seriously as it should have. And I don't think predators are really looked at as much as they should in terms of them being able to access such apps that are actually supposed to be dedicated for children.
Perfect. Let's give your colleagues a chance as well.
Good afternoon. Adding on to the topic of parents being informed of how to protect their children on the internet, I feel parents should also learn or try to find a way to speak to their children, because there's a fear of missing out. We all know that. Speak to their children about all of that, that yes, at a certain age, then we can be exposed to certain things. But before that, there's not much that you're missing out on that is not for your age group.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone. I liked I think it was the chairperson's own opinion on the fact that people are leaving children to be raised by iPads. So I would like to ask, as a teenager and as someone who uses almost all social media platforms, I would like to ask how exactly we would implement our parents' supervision over our accounts without also invading our privacy. Because I feel like as much as it is great for parents to be supervising us on social media platforms so that obviously we're protected from predators, etc., but I would also like my own privacy outside of my mom or my father's supervision. Not to say that, oh no, I want to do wrong things, but I would like my own privacy. That is why I have my own phone. Yeah. So yeah, I would just like to ask, because I don't want my mom to be seeing all my chats with my friends. Not that I'm saying anything bad, but it's just you.
You don't want her in your DMs.
No.
Thank you. Thanks, girls. Thank you so much. The DM and the minister can respond, and then we'll have to release the minister.
Thank you very much, and I really wanted to hear the perspective of young people. As the DM said, nothing about children without children, right? And hearing this young man articulate really some really concrete proposals is really incredible. And this is the thing, right? We need to make sure that we are not leaving children out of the conversation. And that's why I often get very uncomfortable when older people talk about how children are the leaders of our future. He's not a leader of the future, he's leading now. And so it's important to listen to the voices of people that we are talking about, then that they are active participants in the policy-making process. And also some food for thought from some of the ladies here about some of the things that they are thinking about and what is to be done. And I think, again, DM, it gives us also some kind of takeaway to say, right, when we are thinking about some of these policies and regulations that we are wanting to enforce, I didn't know about what the US had done about essentially automatically making an account private if you're a minor, right? But I think a young lady there raised an important issue around how do you then make sure that predators are not pretending to be children online. And so that's why I was saying earlier that this is going to require partnership. This is going to require people who are in this field, people who are writing these papers to come on board and say, right, this is where and how we can protect children. And then, of course, I think the last point, and I think the others were posed to the DM, the last point I want to make is, I think it's really important for teachers and parents to really start being a lot more digitally articulate. And the reason being is because we're not yanking parents out of their comfort zone or teachers out of their comfort zone. But you can't teach people about the safety of their online presence if you yourself don't understand the dangers of digital platforms. Because I think, and I think you mentioned the issue around why are some children protected on online platforms and others not. Because friends of mine who have children know how to set on their iPad age-restrictive, settings. But I'm pretty sure a mom from Kwamdingi, where I come from, probably doesn't. So then that says to me that there's a divide there, where one child is protected and one is not. And so we've got to break that divide down because no one child deserves to be less protected than another. So thank you for the inputs that you've made. I certainly walk away a lot more informed than I was when I came in here. And that's why I think it's important to involve these voices when we're looking at solutions. Over to you, dear.
No, thank you so much. I think those were incredible questions and comments, and really also to thank Kgomo for your input. You know, the first question that was posed, you know, Tinky. You said Tinky, right? Likey. Yes, I'm hearing about it for the first time. I'm even shocked. Adults don't know. I also don't know about likey. But I think, look, first is that we all know that when we design apps, and even if we intended to design them for children, there are those who take advantage. The adults are not supposed to be there, okay? Because that means if you are targeting 13-year-olds to 15-year-olds, it should be just 13-year-olds and 15-year-olds. That's number one. But two, it's really about educating ourselves. What are these apps meant for? I mean, it's the same thing as TikTok, you know, because the idea was interaction until, as it improves, they introduce direct messages. Some apps, when they were developed, they were never developed with these direct. They improve as time goes on. The moment you introduce direct message, then this is where you now open up for social interaction with the rest. Because some content that you create is just to put it out there, and it ends there. There isn't, you can read comments, but you don't have to reply. So the setting of these apps, of the use of the account, is quite key. Secondly, if these apps are designed for teens, that means there must also be some guardian, parent, to always look at the safety element of it. So while we understand children want their privacy, but you are under care. And that under care also includes your interaction with the rest of the world. Because we have to protect your privacy, your rights, and even your space as well. So we can consider some of the things in the education or digital literacy, that when you start to interact with the rest of the world is how do you approve? You know, right now you can privatize your profile. That means even people, when they look for the name Litsike or whatever, they can see the account exists, but there's no access to that profile. Secondly, is when you have to interact, you can introduce additional authenticating elements, which means somebody must actually authorize for you to interact with minister. Somebody would have received an authenticating element that says, okay, this person is. Sometimes you may not even know the person behind the account, which is often the case, right? There's a lot of identity theft and so forth. But we can agree as a parent, and I also speak as a parent myself, we can agree what are the boundaries of this interaction, because then we must limit it to that. If you want to speak to your WhatsApp, let's use, or your friends, let's use other platforms as opposed to where we don't know you are connected with the rest of the world. But regulations and policies must interact, as Khomolemo has expressed, must interact to that. Sometimes these regulations are for public interaction and policies that really safeguards what happens within these apps whatsoever. But we as parents and children must enforce additional protection element in the house of what we do accordingly. So those are quite important things to consider.
I just want to say one thing before the minister leaves, and I whispered to her. It doesn't look like the work that you are doing, Web Rangers and Article 12, that the Basic Education Department at national level is aware of that work. I don't know if you have interacted with the department, whether they are, because I think it would be important to link up with the Department of Basic Education.
we have interacted with the department through colleagues in the room, yes, and we continue to have relations and support even the integration of digital and media literacy in the classroom that's happening at the moment, that started last year. We are supporting the program. There's always more room for collaboration, definitely. So we welcome that, definitely, yeah.
All right. No, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Minister. A token of our appreciation from Ms. Mubari. Thank you. Chairperson, I must say I've lost some street cred. A certain comrade of mine was saying, "Why are you letting the minister go?" The minister has another meeting that she needs to attend to. But at this point, I would like to invite Lucian Pierce and Professor Snail just to reflect on what you've heard from Khomolimo and Pagamile and the minister and the deputy minister. But for me, what really resonated with me is what Khomolimo said regarding different standards for different regions. May I ask you, the legal framework in South Africa, is it fit for purpose? Is it able to deal with some of the concerns that we've heard from Khomolimo and his counterparts? I'll start with you, Lucian.
Thank you, Mr. Dimba. Khomolimo, that was powerful. Sure. You brought tears to my eyes. So perhaps I can draw an analogy. Last year I drove almost to Tanzania in a 20-year-old car. It got me there, but the aircon was insufficient. It was very slow, and the seats were uncomfortable, but it did the trick. So similarly, our laws at the moment, I think, they cover the basics. But I certainly think that there is room for improvement. Advocate and the team were talking earlier about various initiatives that they are following up on. And I certainly think that yourselves working together are going to fill in the gaps that we all know exist. We were chatting a little earlier outside about the right to be forgotten. You know, it is dealt with indirectly, you know. It's a car, but it doesn't have the aircon. So what we would need to do, in my view, is to make it absolutely clear what that right to be forgotten is. The reason I say so is because the young future lawyers out there in Khomolimo here are 14, 15, I don't know how old you are, just like my 14 and 15-year-old are saying things and putting things out there. And one day you're going to be 21, 25, 30, going for an interview, and that picture that you thought was so cool now is not going to be so cool. And you want to be able to get that down wherever it is. So we need to have clarity and not get some lawyer to interpret that there is a right to be forgotten already. We want it crystal clear.
Before I hand it over to Professor Snail, this right to be forgotten, what exactly does it mean? What is it about?
Good point. I forget that we aren't all lawyers. So there was a teenager or a young man in Europe who was a little raucous during his early days and got up to quite a lot of mischief, engaged in some illegal behavior, engaged in fraud. But he grew up to be a very responsible person who owned a really good and successful construction company. But every time his company tried to bid to do government work, this history of his was dug out from way back online, and he kept failing at getting work because of this, because the newspapers would report. He eventually took this matter all the way to the highest court in the EU and took on Google because they were the ones who were perpetuating it, and he won. And what the result of that was that Google was then ordered to remove every trace of information that he was unhappy with, simply because it was outdated, it wasn't relevant, and he'd grown up. So that essentially is the right to be forgotten, to be able to say to an online platform, that doesn't matter, it's not relevant to me anymore, it's causing me harm. But don't rely on the right to be forgotten and think you can put stuff out there and just get it down, rather not.
No, thank you, Lucian. Prof, what's missing? What do we need to add into this mix to strengthen the protections for young people?
By the way, that comrade was me. I think the first issue that we need to tackle before we even get into changing laws is to lead by example. Government cannot be singing the gospel and not be practicing the gospel. We have an information regulator. It is a panel of 5 members. It's the Honorable Pensi Tlakula and her members, the honorable members, and I'm insisting on honorable. Yes, they are very honorable. They were appointed by the president and they were appointed by the parliament of this country. It is important that people know that the information regulator has a purpose, an important purpose of protecting privacy. So it's all great for us to come here and talk and tell the children that they should be protected, but we're not leading by example. A month ago, government was taking the regulator to court. And that's not leading by example. Wait. When I was a teenager, once upon a time, in a country, in another country, I'm not going to mention that, we were taught the Grundgesetz. It was part of our education. Not just religion, not just science, but the Grundgesetz. How do you grow up as an individual not even knowing the constitution of this land? And one of the rights in the constitution is the right to privacy and the right to access to information. We need to get that right in the educational space first, right? Yes, I do it in higher educational space, but we need to do it in the high schools, we need to do it in the primary schools, we need to do it in the creches, you know? That is the first step for us to protect the children, and by leading by example. And I'm going to emphasize this, right? There's another government department that's also not leading by example. And I'm not going to mention who they are. They know who they are, right? How can we be telling the children about data privacy when they switch on the TV, they see litigation between the same body that must protect the right to privacy and government? You be the judge of that. But that's my contribution. Oh, and the children at the back, you guys are awesome.
Yes.
And
No, thank you very much, Prof. So leading by example, walking the talk, we start there, and we train them young.
exactly.
Another point. And then we can talk about gaps in the legislation. Let's start with the practice.
Let's get it done first, you know.
Absolutely.
Let's
Yeah.
educate properly. Let's deal with the legislation that we have. We do have POPIA. The parliamentarians did sit down, they legislated, they thought, and they put it into law. Let's practice that law. Let's stop being a lawless society.
Absolutely. Wow. No, let me hand it back to you all. As young people say, Prof is dropping bars. Any inputs from the floor, questions or comments that you would like to make on any of the input that has been made here today? Let's start at the back. There's a gentleman at the back. There's a young lady across the aisle, and over to you. So let's take 3. Oh, there's another one? 4. All right. We'll take 4 input. Really, we want to have this as a discussion, as we are not here to listen to speeches, but we really want to hear from different perspectives on this issue. So over to you, sir, at the back.
Afternoon. My name is Lefa Mokoena from ICASA. It's quite interesting that you cannot do anything for children without their presence. And I appreciate that school children are here but I'm similarly disappointed that when I spoke to their madam or their teacher, she said something very, very important. She said that already these kids are in the program. They already know what they are doing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, there are so many children who do not know about this.
Yeah.
I've got my own child who's 12 years. And I always have to fight with her about this kind of interaction she has on the internet. And she's not here. She's not from their school. One person will be provoked to say that it's only children from advantaged schools who are here. And these are some of the things, if, like someone said, a very important point, even the minister says that, coming from the rural areas, people in the rural areas, they do not know anything about this whatsoever. Now, imagine even my own child, who's at another school, I won't mention the name, they are not here. How did they come to know this? How come other schools do not know? I only know of only 2 schools that are here. I only saw 2 boys. These are the very same boys tomorrow. One of them is going through a case. I think he's around 21 years. Surely he started long time ago harassing and bullying girls on the internet. And these are the kind of things that we have to be dealing with. That's the first point that I really wish, if we are genuine about dealing with this kind of issues, all the schools at least should be represented. The second point that I want to make is about the collaborations. The minister and the deputy minister talked about the collaborations that are important. It's quite interesting that ICASA, FPB, NFVF, and all other kind of associations, they still have to find each other with regard to the other one regulating online, the other one regulating outside online. Then how do you deal with a situation where just because you come from, your mandate tells you what to do, and therefore you are not willing to budge or be agile enough to deal with the problems that our own children are facing? Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Paramila will respond later, but there's also an issue around the regulators forum. Hopefully the CEO can also talk about the regulators forum, because it was established to address exactly the point you've just made. Over to you, ma'am.
Talking about technology, I feel like as a society, as like on a day-to-day basis, technology is included in everything, and they will sometime reach a point where technology rules over everything, and eventually we'll become overwhelmed by this because we don't know how to handle it. So what I want to know is how our current leaders planning on helping us, like the future generation, be able to adjust to these constant changes, because technology is actually a very dangerous thing. And I understand that they do communicate how dangerous it is, but there have been so many cases, like extremely violent cases, from technology and from all of that. So I think not just from like educating on data and privacy and all of that, I think what is also important is educating on technology and its revolution, and how technology can actually end up playing a huge role in society. And another thing we can't control is what type of role society is going to play, because it can either play a good role or a bad role. But I think what is most important is how are we going to handle that when it does happen. So that's my point.
Great point. Excellent point. Thank you. Over to you, sir. Yes.
Thank you very much indeed.
Can I ask you to stand up, because the people at the front cannot see who's talking. Thank you.
It's a long way up. Thank you very much indeed. And I thank also I think it was you, sir, who reminded me that in 2006 was the first International Privacy Day. I spoke at that in Brussels. And I spoke on co-regulation between the regulators and industry. It seems to me that co-regulation has gone out of fashion. There is a growing gap between those organizations in social media who are regulating themselves and those who have rather given up. And we know who they are. So that is one question. How can we in South Africa force, by co-regulation, that social media has the same effect in here as it does, for example, in Europe? And I think Europe is a very good example. And only one other thing is I have 6 children. 5 of them are daughters. The oldest is 39 and the youngest is 24. I can promise you the difference in what they know and what they understand about social media and about privacy is enormous. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The Prof will take that question on the issue of co-regulation or self-regulation. There was a hand here. Oh, yes. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Afternoon. What I would like to point out is that I also don't believe in younger children getting iPads, as that it makes them feel like they have the right to devices. And I also think that as children and parents, we should also have open communication with each other. Not have a strict parent who's going to not let you have a phone, or not have a parent who's just going to let you have the phone and not supervise you with that phone. I believe that between a learner or a pupil and a parent, we should all discuss what is going on in our lives. Well, as a child, I should discuss with my parent that this is what's happening on my phone, or I found this, is this right? And even as parents, I feel like leaders who are here, who are part of like these regulators, they should also inform our parents, as our parents are also trying to adapt to new technology every single day. They do not know what to protect us from. Sometimes they are also misinformed. So that's what I would like to point out.
Interesting concept of co-regulation at home. Chair, and then I will allow the panel to respond to those comments.
You know, I'm not going to talk as the regulator. I want to talk as a grandmother to young parents in this room. And what I see happening, and that's the beginning of the problems that we have in our society. You go, you visit, or young people visit you, then and with their children, they greet you, hi, grandma. From there, the mother is on a device, the father is on a device, the children are on the device. No one speaks to you. This is real, you know what? It's the reality. Even those, I was in Tanzania, saw a young couple coming to a restaurant and they were celebrating something because they were dressed very nicely. They come, they sat there, and they were on their devices throughout that dinner. And we have to address this. Young parents who are in this room, that's where the problems begin. And I need to say it plainly because it's like that.
Thank you. Perhaps the CEO can respond to the question regarding the collaboration amongst regulators.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
The question about Regulators Forum is that we launched the Regulators Forum last year towards the end of the year. And it's a forum where we are going to work together to look at our different programs and how we can collaborate. For example, when you go out to communities, how do we go together and deliver the same message? When we make people aware about what we're doing, it should be from the same, all of us as regulators. I also want to touch on the issue of schools, because I think it's an important point that has been made, that we need to ensure that we reach out to all the schools. We have a program that we call Dikopano as a regulator. And I think as we go out on our next Dikopano, we need to have this kind of education to schools in the area. Because what we normally do, we go to an area for the whole week. We start on Monday, we go to taxis, we make people aware, but I don't think we go to schools. I think we have to go to schools and reach out to schools in those areas. It's going to be difficult to bring all the schools to Rosebank. It's impossible. You are not going to be able to do that. And I think the best approach should be that during our Dikopan, and I hope colleagues in communication, Mr. Timber, are taking note of that, that when you go out, let's utilize the opportunity that will be in communities. We're going to the Northwest very soon. Let's go to schools in rural areas of the Northwest and speak about this thing, talk about this thing, and engage with children. And then let's invite regulators in the forum and other regulators to be with us to deal with these things. I'll make other comments when I have an opportunity to. Thanks.
Thank you, CEO. Paramila, and then the rest of the panel can respond to some of those comments.
Thank you so much. From the colleague from ICASA, I definitely 100% agree with you. We are not, as web rangers, we are not touching as many learners, we're not reaching out to as many learners as we need to. And I don't think there's an expectation from civil society to do that kind of work. I think we have an easy win with learners. Schools are the custodians of learners. Learners are there every day for sure, from 7:30 until 3 o'clock. Right? That's the perfect place where we can kind of insert issues of digital and media literacy so that young people all over South Africa, when we speak of young people, we speak broadly representing all provinces in the country, that we can confidently say we've trained young people in schools. Again, the biggest challenge that we find, and it's unfortunate that the minister has left, but the biggest challenge we find when we are in schools is that teachers don't take extracurricular seriously if it's not coming from national. We can provide the most high-tech concepts, briefs, guidelines, curriculums for teachers. They don't take them seriously if they're not coming from national, right? They see them as a burden on their shoulders, and they're not willing to engage. Same with parents. You know, once you call parents to a parents' meeting, all parents take parents' meetings very seriously. People take day offs to go and attend parents' meetings because everything that comes from the school is very important, right? So if we call parents at a Rosebank at the Radisson Hotel and say we want to do digital literacy, no parent is going to show up. But DBE has that power to call parents and say, if you, as part of the onboarding of a grade 9 learner, to say, for 1 week or 1 month, if you want your learner to be in this school, then you will onboard online training as a parent together with your child. Easy win. Right? So there are a lot of things that, and again, in supporting DBE, because they can't think of all these things and how to, and the approach. So that we are supporting DBE in creatively thinking about innovative ways to bring teachers and parents on board so that learners all across the country, I definitely agree with you. When I work with my web rangers, I always say they are a representation of children, but they are not a full representation because there's a child in the Eastern Cape, in KZN, that does not have these kind of skills to be able to navigate the digital space. What about them, right? The second thing is that and again, it's unfortunate that colleagues from big tech are not here. I can proudly say that they are partners of the Web Rangers program. So TikTok, colleagues from TikTok, from Google, from Meta, because, and again, I say this as a partner, that they are business, they are for business at the end of the day. It is up to government to make sure that we are pushing and pinching them in all the right places so they can invest. Article 12 members last year put on a submission in the UNESCO policy guidelines for social media platforms. It was a global submission process that they went through with UNESCO. And one of the things that they had said in the guidelines was that it's like those people that pollute, the factory that pollutes the river, and the community drinks from that river. The least you can do is clean the water, continuously clean the water, because you are polluting in that river. So social media platforms, government are the only people or institution that can be able to pinch them where it hurts the most money. Give us money for digital literacy across the board in the country. They make the millions. They can give us money for digital literacy so that every young person, every learner in the classroom has access to digital literacy. Yeah.
Can I add? Yes. To add on what Pagimile said, besides, I think the chairperson of the Information Regulator and the minister highlighted that they are trying to integrate digital literacy into the school curriculum and syllabus. So giving them time and a chance to properly do so will help all learners across the basic department, the DBE, to have digital literacy and be exposed to such. we know that there's a digital divide between schools that are in urban areas versus rural areas. I'm sure no child in a rural area has access to a phone or know the internet. So them being informed will lead them to, when they do have the chances or the opportunities to be in the online space, they'll have the knowledge, the pre-knowledge on how to navigate those online spaces. While us who are fortunate enough to have those devices and access such spaces, we are going to learn continuously with the integration of the digital literacy and media literacy into the curriculum. So giving the department chance and time to integrate all of the things they've said into full action will lead or will help most South African children to be aware of what's happening in the online space and how to safely navigate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I do know, even though the minister has left, there are colleagues from the DBE here. We have colleagues from curriculum planning and others from, I think, support. They are all here.
Safety.
Yes, safety. So I think there's been a constant repeat of this call for more work to be done in terms of curriculum development and to include digital literacy in that space. I think it's a very clear call that has been made through this session. Lucien, what else have you heard from
Yes,
this
thanks, Mr.
deliberation?
Gimba. So just on web ranges, you know, I must say I encountered the organization for the first time in 2015. It was when a very good lawyer at my firm offered to work with yourselves. You know, what Web Ranges does is admirable. They've grown from strength to strength. But talking about 2015 and the young activists in the back there, say that in a positive light, I read a stat in 2015 that said that 49% of teenagers access the internet from their bedrooms. So it got me thinking about your comment about co-regulation at home and how we do that. And in our house, we have an arrangement based on trust. Perhaps I can draw an analogy. You know, both my kids live in my house. I should be lucky. Just like I can knock on their door and go into their rooms and check if the rooms are tidy, by agreement, of course. The arrangement is that with their phones, it's the same thing. At any time, I can say, can I check what's going on in your phone? So it's about trust. And let me tell you something. I have not checked my kids' phones yet because I trust them. So what I think is there's got to be that arrangement that you spoke about, you know, not too strict and not too liberal in terms of that. Things like, why should a 12-year-old get a phone when they don't need it? Not really necessary. You can phone from the office. There's an appropriate time for phones, which is why you'll find, if you look at platforms like TikTok, they have a policy, well, not a policy, their privacy policies talk about access from 13 onwards, of course, subject to consent of your parents. So they recognize that that is when people typically start using phones. Coincidentally, to the point about regulation and how to fix sometimes the excesses that these social media platforms engage in and the advantage that they take of us in the global south. Using TikTok as an example, 2 years ago, if you had looked at their privacy policy, it had nothing about South African teenagers or people underage or children, anyone under 18, accessing. So people could open up a TikTok account. But given the activity of our regulators over the past few years, taking on WhatsApp, taking on more recently the Department of Basic Education to promote privacy rights, I think they're starting to see that they need to comply and are moving in the right direction, not fast enough, as Homolemo points out. If you look at DeepSeek, which launched fairly recently, and you read their terms and conditions, they provide for privacy protection here in South Africa. So people are learning that they can't just take advantage of us. So in that sense, I think, you know, to the point that the ICASA parent, if I can call you that, makes, we are starting to have web ranges. We are starting to see social media platforms take cognizance of what they need to do here. Not fast enough, but if the regulator shows its teeth more, you'll see that they will step into line.
Absolutely. Let's scale up, let's move faster. Prof, a call to action from you as we close this session.
I want to reply to the lady at the back who mentioned something about technology and the law and the change of the law. I'm a teacher, by the way, but I teach elderly people. There is a legal philosopher called Lawrence Lessig, and I want you guys to Google Lawrence Lessig when you guys leave here. Lawrence Lessig, some 30 years ago, started to speak about code is law, right? And I, as a cyber lawyer, some 20 years ago, when I heard of code was law, I said, Lessig is mad. But now, because I'm a older cyber lawyer, I've noticed that code indeed is law, right? What happens in Silicon Valley affects the presidential elections in America.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? What happens in code affects our law. It's no longer the other way around, where parliamentarians get to chill for 10 years and say, yeah, let's regulate that. You know? Now, code is law. That's your homework, guys.
8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Tell your teacher tomorrow that code is law.
It's a frightening prospect because you then have to ask who is coding.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Therefore, making that law.
Those have power.
You know, also power dynamics at play there. Please, can we give an appreciation to our panel? Lots and lots of exciting and insightful things were shared. We're going to break briefly for tea for about 10 minutes, but please, I need to mention this. Let us not cause a data breach here in this session. Some photographs were taken of the younger people at the back, and I would like to believe that none of their parents or guardians have given consent for their photographs to be taken. Have they? Yes. Oh, have they? Yes. Oh, fabulous. Take those pictures away, please. Use them responsibly. Thank you so much. Let's resume at 3. Thank you.
Can we settle down, please? And those who are outside, please come inside with your tea and your snack. Whilst we are doing that, I don't have the program with me, but can I ask Monica, you're already here, the panelists to come forward. Lead by example. Yes. Messi Kingori. Oh, he's joining online. Can we test? Is she online? Messi, are you online? Is there a way of testing whether she is online? Okay. All right, Ephraim. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Mr. Dimba had to leave early. So as a result, he has, I don't want to use the political terminology and say he has deployed me. He had asked me to stand in for him. But the good thing is that I don't have to moderate. You know, when you moderate, you say all those very educated things that Mr. Dimba was saying after each and every speaker. We've got Monica to moderate this session. And without any waste of time, I'll hand over to you, Monica.
Fantastic. It's a challenge to bring people back to the room after an extremely engaging first session and, of course, a nice coffee break. But I hope that people will be slowly coming back. But in the interest of time and our tight program, we will be kicking off. And I think we've heard this morning a lot about the need for international perspectives and international collaboration. Okay, thank you. And we, together with the Information Regulator, thought that international perspectives should definitely be on this program. And therefore, we are very privileged and honored to have Future of Privacy Forum, that is a global and leading think tank that does absolutely phenomenal work in this space, to join us remotely today. And we are lucky to have Mercy that leads the work of FPF in Africa to tell us about FPF and its work in the continent. And Dr. Desara Dushi that leads currently the FPF work on the protection of children will give you really interesting insights into the work that is happening in Europe with very concrete proposals and regulations and specific solutions. And then we have a fantastic panel of various stakeholders representing diverse viewpoints on the more concrete elements of how we can address the challenges that we heard about this morning. So we move a little bit more into the technical side, and I'll be hearing your perspectives that how in your roles you are addressing the sort of fundamental issues that we had been discussing earlier. So without further ado, the floor is yours, Mercy. If you can just introduce FPF and yourself to the audience. And thanks for coming back with your coffees.
Thank you so much, Monica. Greetings, everyone. All protocols observed. My name is Mercy Kimori, and I'm the Policy Manager for Africa at the Future of Privacy Forum. So first of all, I would want to extend our gratitude to the Information Regulator of South Africa, to Naspers and Prosus for kindly extending this invitation for us to be part of this year's Privacy Day celebrations. To start off, I'll start with a brief introduction about who is FPF, what do we do, and later on I'll invite my colleague, Dr. Desara, to make her presentation on children's privacy. FPF is a global nonprofit that's based in Washington, D.C. and brings together academics, civil society, government officials, and industry, mainly with the goal of evaluating the societal, policy, and legal implications of data uses. So we also are keen on identifying the risks and, most importantly, developing appropriate protections. Next slide, please. So we have various work streams, and I think one that is very of interest for this particular event is youth and ed. We also have legislative and regulatory engagement that involves us participating in various regulatory processes around the world, mostly through, participating in public participations that are issued by regulators around the world. Closely related to youth and ed, we also have a work stream around AI and algorithms, and also the interesting ad tech. Next slide. Our offices, we have global offices and presence in various parts around various parts of the world. We're mainly based in Washington DC, but we have also offices in Brussels, where Desara is based, Singapore, India, Nairobi, where I am, and Tel Aviv. I'll speak briefly about our work in Africa. So our work in Africa began in 2022, and so far we have been able to make significant strides around making known data protection developments in the continent to our stakeholders. We have, our first contribution, to the work in Africa was around developing our researching around what does privacy mean from an African perspective. We have also engaged in research around what are the priorities of data protection authorities in several African countries. We have also, dealt with the topic of harmonization of regulations, which is also a very pertinent question when it comes to data protection and privacy. As I mentioned earlier, we also participate in numerous regulatory and policy engagements and have been privileged to make our submissions to various data protection authorities in the continent, the latest one being the Kenyan Data Protection Authority on their draft data sharing code. We also are keen on contributing to discussions such as this towards making best practices of privacy well known especially with our work that we're currently doing. And with that, allow me to hand it over to Desara, who will make her presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Monica, for inviting us to this very interesting event. I will very briefly jump into the main topics that I'll be covering. I will start with an overview of the European Union Digital Services Act, mainly focusing on the measures that this act requires for protection of children online. Then I will very briefly explain the European Commission's call for evidence on guidelines on the protection of minors online. And then last, but the most important part, I will talk about the FPF comments to this call for evidence. So starting with the DSA, it regulates online intermediaries and platforms with more enhanced or more higher requirements or obligations for very large online platforms and very large online search engines, and I will later explain what these are. The services that are covered by the DSA are mainly marketplaces, social networks, content sharing platforms, app stores, and online travel and accommodation platforms. And the main goal of the DSA is to prevent illegal and harmful activities online and the spread of disinformation, to ensure user safety, to protect fundamental rights, and to create a fair and open online platform environment. The DSA initially entered into force, so partially entered into force in August 2023. Only the rules regarding the VLOPs and VLOSes, so the very large online platforms and very large online search engines, which amount to 45 million users, more than 45 million users, so 10% of the EU's population. Then the rest of the rules started applying as of 17 February 2024. So now DSA is completely in force for all platforms. What providers are covered by the DSA? There are 4 groups of platforms that the DSA regulates, starting from the very large online platforms. These are the platforms that I mentioned before, which amount to over 45 million users in Europe. And there are these have particular risks, and that's why they have more stricter regulation applying to them. Then we have the second group, which are online platforms. These bring together sellers and consumers, such as online marketplaces, app stores, and collaborative economic platforms and social media platforms. The third group are hosting services. such as cloud and web hosting services. And then the last group are intermediary services, which offer network infrastructure such as internet access providers and domain name registrars. Now, the rules of the DSA apply to all of the online intermediaries that offer their services in the European single market, regardless of whether they are established in the EU or not. Now, moving directly to the measures to protect children and young people online, the DSA bases these measures on, of course, the best interest of the child principle, the right to child protection, the right to freedom of expression, the right to non-discrimination, the right to protection of personal data, and consumer protection. And the European Commission has released a booklet on how does the DSA protect minors online, which is specifically addressed to minors themselves. So it is written in an age-appropriate language for them to understand what are their rights provided by the DSA. The main article that focuses on the measures to protect children and young people online in the DSA is Article 28. And in this article, it is ensuring that providers of online platforms that are accessible to minors have to put in place appropriate proportionate measures to ensure privacy, safety, and security of minors in their services. And these providers cannot present advertisements to their interface based on profiling using personal data of the recipient when they are certain that the recipient is a minor. And when complying with these obligations, they cannot pretend they cannot claim that they need to process additional personal data of the minor in this case. The last part of this article allows the Commission to issue guidelines to assist providers of online platforms to comply with these obligations, and I will move later on to this. Now, the measures that the DSA provides are not only included in Article 28, but they are also spread throughout the text of the DSA, and they are mainly focused on personal data privacy, which means adapting specific privacy and security settings by default, child-friendly information, which means that the terms and conditions must be written in a way that is easily understandable by minors, so in a child-friendly language. And those services that are primarily directed to minors should put extra efforts in this regard. Dark patterns are prohibited by the DSA, but this is only mentioned in the recital. And the DSA also mentions the creation of an EU Code of Conduct for age-appropriate design, and the work on this is in progress. Now, VLOPs and VLOSs need to conduct risk assessments because of the high level of risk that they pose, need to conduct risk assessments on the potential risks that children face when using their services. And they must then put measures in place to mitigate these identified risks. And these measures can include parental control, age verification, tools to help young people signal abuse or get support. And in case of non-compliance with these obligations, it can lead to fines up to 6% of their annual turnover. Now, the DSA introduces a very interesting term, which is the trusted flaggers. And these are entities that have particular expertise or competence for the purposes of detecting, identifying, and notifying illegal content. Any entity can register and can be recognized by the Digital Services Coordinator of the specific member state, and these entities usually are the child rights organizations, for example, and their task is to report content which they consider illegal or against the terms and conditions of the platform. Now, when the VLOPs and VLOSs consider the risk that their service pose to young users, they have to consider three main issues. First, if the minors will easily understand how the services work, which means age-appropriate language, basically. Second, if the minors risk finding content that could harm their health, physical, mental, and moral development, so age-inappropriate content. And third, whether the design features could cause addiction. Now, these are the requirements that the DSA has in terms of measures to protect children and young people online. And as I mentioned, the Article 28 allows DSA, empowers the Commission to issue guidelines to help providers of online platforms apply with these measures. And it aims to ensure a harmonized implementation of the rules in all EU member states. Now, the guidelines that the European Commission will release will provide a non-exhaustive list of good practices and recommendations for online platform providers, and it will help the Commission and the digital service coordinators to supervise platforms and to enforce the DSA. The guiding principle of these guidelines will be the rights of the child, of course, and the best interest of the child. And the guidelines will take a risk-based approach to online harm. It will online platforms based on these guidelines should regularly conduct a child-specific impact assessment that will be structured around the 5C typology of risks, which is OECD 5C typology of risks. And this OECD divides these risks into 5 categories, which are content, conduct, contact, consumers, and cross-cutting risks. The guidelines will develop a harmonized age verification solution based on the EU Digital Identity Wallet that will be used to verify whether a user is 18 or older. Because the age for minors in the EU member states is up to 18. The Commission, with this call for evidence, has invited stakeholders to provide their input, and the call for evidence was launched in August and was open until the end of September last year. And it invited stakeholders to provide input on any comments or further considerations that should be taken into account in the scope of the guidelines, any major risks or concerns, and whether they agree with the proposed 5C typology of risks, and additionally, if they have any good practices or recommendations. Now, FPF replied or responded through public comments to this call for evidence, and our focus was into three main points. First, that we wanted to acknowledge that the implementation of age assurance or verification requirements introduces several risks and concerns related to ensuring high privacy, safety, and security. Second, that there should be a child impact assessment to assess systems for determining age-appropriate default settings. And last one, we provided some additional recommendations to address additional privacy risks. Starting with the first point, we stressed that the mitigation of privacy risks can mitigate also additional risks associated with the 5C typology of risks, because privacy is a cross-cutting issue. And we wanted to highlight that many high accurate age assurance methods are highly invasive, and some less invasive ones can be less accurate. However, depending on the needs of the online service, sometimes the less accurate methods might be more appropriate. And that's why the best method must be matched for each use case, so there is not a one-size-fits-all cases. There is a need for flexible mandates, particularly given that age assurance and age verification is highly contextual. And to mitigate the risks, the age assurance methods should be specifically tailored to the service, use, audience, and content. Now, the FPF has also developed an infographic, which is not related to this specific call for evidence, but it was developed before, which analyzes technologies and trade-offs of age assurance. And here you can see that there are 3 types of age assurance in this infographic: the declaration, estimation, and verification. Now, the DSA guidelines mainly focus on the verification part, the age verification, because of the purpose of using the EID wallet. And here in this infographic, you can later also check the risks that were identified. For the sake of time, I will not spend more time on the infographic, and I will move to the second point of the FPF public comments, which are focused on a child impact assessment for determining age-appropriate default settings. And we wanted to mention that online service settings are the most privacy protective of minors' data when they are configured to the type of platform and the potential privacy risks that may arise from the service. And the age bands used for these settings should be tailored to the service and based on the identified risks. Now, child-specific impact assessments should, of course, account for the treatment of varying age group of minors, and privacy protective default settings should be implemented based on the protection by design and by default obligations of the GDPR. So we wanted to highlight that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Privacy, safety, and security risks that may arise from a service are only mentioned within the DSA recitals, as I mentioned before, and we think that the best interest of the child would be more centralized, taken into consideration by the online platforms if the risks to the minors were more central within the DSA. So not only mentioned into the recitals. That's why we recommend that the DSA guidelines include clearly defined precautionary principles towards minors. And the last recommendation that we provided is related to addressing additional privacy risks that can mitigate the 5C typology factors. And here we provide 4 types of recommendations. The first one is regarding proactive communication and age-appropriate reporting mechanisms, such as push notifications and available reporting mechanisms. And we highlight that these tools should correspond, of course, to minors' developmental capabilities. Second, age-based data protection and communication safeguards that would limit the collection and sharing of minors' data. Third, neutral design principles for minors' data protection. So interfaces should not influence minors' choices, and platforms should avoid deceptive language or design. And the last one, accessible data disclosure for minors. So all information that is provided to minors should be easily understandable by them. And with this, I close the presentation. Thank you so much. And I welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This has been a fantastic, succinct overview of a very complex piece of legislation. So we really appreciate us getting that understanding of very concrete proposed legislative solutions that Europe believes are the way to address many of the challenges that we have talked about this morning. But before we move into our panel, actually an apology because I have not really introduced myself. So I don't want you to leave the room just thinking that there's this Monica person that has lunches with Advocate Pansy Takula in obscure corners of the universe, and then someone somehow materializes herself in Johannesburg. And I'm really glad that I came to Johannesburg rather than asking all of you to go to Amsterdam. So, to the point that we've heard before. Let us do it this way. Let us first hear from our panelists, and Sarah and Mercy have kindly agreed to stay online. And then we will be opening the floor for discussion. And let's challenge ourselves to have as animated a discussion like we had for the first part of our event today. I know things are getting a little bit more complicated and a little more specific here, and we may have less of the youthful energy in the room, but I think this is now for us adults to discuss concrete ways to address their pleas for changing things around. And I think this is not as glamorous as the first part, but equally important to discuss the work of the individuals that are in this panel and what they are looking at, what their plans are. And we have a fantastic representation. So I'll start with you, Hulengwi, to tell us what is your work in this space and how you address some of the issues that we've been talking about today.
Thank you very much. I just gained another version of my name. I always do a collection. Today I had another one. So
please accept my apologies. This is only my day 3.5 in South Africa.
Thank you very much. So my name is Hlengiwe Dube. I'm affiliated with the Center for Human Rights, which is at the University of Pretoria. So I head the Center for Human Rights Expression, Information and Digital Rights unit. So essentially we look at those thematic areas, and within that broad framework we also look into the work of children in the digital age as well. So in that regard, as far as children online are concerned, just last year we published a book on privacy perspectives in Africa. And I was the editor of the book together with another colleague. And my chapter in the book speaks to everything that was said in the previous sessions. So I look at the conundrum. I used the word conundrum because I realized that it's a very complex issue. So I titled it Digital Vulnerabilities and the Privacy Conundrum for Children in the Digital Age. And I was proposing lessons for Africa. So I was mainly looking at how children are consuming a lot of online content and also getting in touch with technology, digital resources, as we have seen. And then I was also looking at the different vulnerabilities that they face in terms of their behaviors, the content that they get in touch with, and also, like the chairperson say, they are netizens. You know, they seem like they are clued up as far as the digital age is concerned, but you realize that they are so very naive as they use the digital space. So I give an example of one hashtag which trended at some point. I think it was in 2022. It says, "The risk I took." And if you Google that, you will find children, teens, posting content online about very risky sexual behavior that they were engaged in, and pregnancies, and they also were taking pictures of themselves, maybe with, pregnancy tummies, and their children as well. And like one of our colleagues in the previous session mentioned when they were talking about the right to be forgotten, that this is a child now, but tomorrow they'll be an adult, and they will go for an interview. And what do we say? We say the internet never forgets. So what happens to that, the risk I took and all that information? And also, I also make mention of the realities that we face on the continent, that as far as, the digital literacy is concerned, that we just have general literacy levels. It's even worse when it comes to digital literacy skills. It doesn't mean that if you have a PhD, suddenly you are in a position to guide the children in the digital age, which puts us in a predicament of how do we parent in the digital age. And we have a lot of gaps around digital literacy, because, when you're talking to a child and say, when I was your age, I used to read books, I will pass the examination. But when it comes to issues of the digital age, do adults or the parents and the guardians have a point of reference to say, when I was your age, I used to do this? Because they did not have that kind of technology. They was not in that space. But now you're supposed to live in the moment and parent the child in the digital age. So that navigating the parental responsibility for the digital age becomes a very difficult responsibility. I'll give a very personal experience where my mother who didn't go very far as school is concerned. And she lives with my niece, who is a toddler. And she obviously has the tablet or the iPad. And my mother, what she knows is that children watch cartoons. And now we know how, cartoons are not like cartoons as they used to be when we grew up. How does she verify that, this is clean, this is appropriate content? She doesn't have that capacity. As long as it's cartoons, she thinks it's appropriate for the child. So how then do we educate parents and guardians to parent appropriately in the digital age as well? That's another area. In as much as we can have, the curriculum change and all that, inclusion of online issues, there's a segment of parents as well. My friend who is Dr. So-and-so, she has a PhD, she sent me a message the other day saying, can I ask my son to give me his password to his phone? And then I started talking about, privacy of children and all that. And then I realized that, it's not an absolute right. So then I told him that, his privacy is a right, but it's not an absolute right. There are justifiable limitations to the right. And then she says, I'm suspecting that this boy is viewing inappropriate content. So my response was that as a parent, you know, there's the parental responsibility that you have. You have to chaperone the child even in the digital age. So that could be a justifiable limitation to privacy, because if you don't guide the child accordingly, you will both have problems in the future or even now. That, you know, if he's exposed to inappropriate content, that might lead to even addiction. And then his academic side suffers. So without really wasting time, those are some of the issues that I was looking at. And then I was also specifically looking at the legal framework, whether, you know, we have, you know, is it fit for purpose? You know, when you're talking about gender-based violence and you look at your GBV Act and technology-facilitated violence, is it fit for purpose for this particular age? If you look at the Children's Act, is it fit for purpose? The Education Act, we go to the teacher curriculum itself. If we're saying life orientation should now start incorporating online safety and all those things, there are educators as well who are supposed to be administering you know, the curriculum. What are we saying about the curriculum of the educators themselves? It has to be looked into. And what are we saying about those that are already in the system as well? So it means we need interventions in different areas. It's going to take a lot of, you know, multi-stakeholder approach, but you need a lot of creativity, a lot of commitment. But another very important stakeholder is the media. You know, the role of the media. Just recently, when we had the decision of the court around the publication of results, the media was abuzz with the case. You know, the publication of results, the metric results, and all that. But soon after that publication, what does the media do? It moves on. Results are out, the media has moved on to something else, but have we engaged, have we had a robust public discussion around the issue? No, but we need the media to be that conduit where, you know, it educates the public, provides that platform where we can have this conversation around, you know, what were the substantive issues, you know. So those are some of the issues that I address in some of the work that I do. Thank you.
Very, very important point. I think that you've mentioned something that transpires through our discussions, which is not one single measure will solve the challenges, that there must be a simultaneous effort on various elements. And I think even the European regulation that Sarah has walked us through demonstrates that the sort of plurality of elements that are to address, also like stakeholder involvement and communication and references to appropriate language for increasing that literacy. But what strikes me above all in your intervention is that you also see that digital inclusion and digital literacy are particular challenges for the global south. You know, we have investments really across the world, and we observe on a daily basis the differences in terms of access to certain digital infrastructure, and also the fact how access to digital infrastructure can actually empower, you know, the countries. How can they do a leap and overcome some of the deficiencies? So I think conundrum is probably the best, you know, word to describe this word. But I think the conundrum should not stop us from, you know, taking action. So Ephraim, over to you. I think the media have been called to action. Maybe you can give us that perspective.
Thanks, Monica. So my name is Ephraim Tlaku. I'm with the Film and Publications Board. Just at the core of our mandate, it's on the distribution and the classification of films, publications, games. So take into consideration the discussion that our colleagues were having on the age assurance. I thought I should start there as a start, just to give context. So I'm a father to a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. He's going to turn 10 in June. So our classification guidelines, which is one of our regulatory documents that we're enforcing, ensuring that, you know, there's A, which is all, everyone can watch it, there's 7 to 9, then there's 10 to 12, then there's 13, then there's 16, then obviously then is adult content. Now, my 13-year-old who wants to play games with his 9-year-old brother, you know, the conundrum that I, as a parent, this one has access to material for 13-year-olds, Now, the 9-year-old, and I think the school children were saying that there's FOMO, where fear of missing out, I need to know what he's doing. How then do we, even within the household, how then do we manage ensuring that there's age assurance? The 9-year-old only has access to 9-year-old content, and the 13-year-old, but and this is the reality that all of us are facing. So just on sort of the conundrum we're having in ensuring that children at specific age are only getting content that is specific to their age. And then on the other work that we are doing on the distribution, it's ensuring that there's no distribution of prohibited and harmful content. And prohibited content comes, especially in our conversations today, it's on distribution of child sexual abuse material or violence against children. So taking videos or taking pictures of children being abused, either sexually or physically, it is illegal sort of conduct for you to be distributing that or even to be possessing it. So these are some of the things that we're educating the public on, ensuring that specifically on violence against children and child sexual abuse, which is commonly known as child pornography. That's an illegal. You should not be having such contact with you, and we've seen a lot of cases that sort of the police is working on, obviously with an assistance from us. Another one, specifically on the protection of children, specifically on the privacy, is the non-consensual sharing of private images and private videos, which is commonly called as revenge porn. This affects children as well because some of the material, children are self-generating content. These are girlfriend, boyfriend, they're sharing videos among themselves. Next thing, the relationship goes sour. Now, the poor girl, and in most cases are girls, now they become talk of the town, they're trending within school. How then do we then protect them? So non-consensual sharing of private images or videos, that's one of the prohibited content that we are monitoring within the online space. So I think for us, this is the work that we are continuing to do because like the conversations before, we can come up with all these laws. There are sections of the act, we can go to court, we can do all of those. But it all boils down to the society. We need to educate our parents. Children need to know about the consequences. Like we were saying, internet never forgets. So the actions that we are taking, you need to be responsible. And like we were saying, we need to have that trust relationship as us as parents and the children. But they need to know the responsibilities and sort of the consequences that come up with the online behavior and online safety. I think that's a common theme that was coming through, that online safety should be one of the key work within our curriculum because that's where we can have access to kids and that's where parents can also be educated by the kids because our kids know much more better than the parents, but if then they are educated in schools, they can share the message with the parents. And like we're saying, the older parents who are now taking care of the young kids, how then do we bring them on board so that they are not being left behind, but they know their responsibilities as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very important point, and I think that indeed, when we looked at the harms, we've discussed the harms this morning, in particular, like with, the rise of AI capabilities to create, deep fakes and content that doesn't even require, this type of physical presence, but still affects children in the same way. So these are the challenges that are like evolving with this rapid access to this type of technologies. They're evolving very, very quickly. So in a way, it's a constant chase of being able to address those risks. But over to you, Colin. In terms of this discussion that is happening, when I Googled you up to find out who is going to be on my panel, I found out that you became a TV star based on this discussion around the regulators' intervention. But I will not be pushing you to give us comments on that, but rather on the regulators' sort of thinking to address those conundrums. And what are your plans? Do you have any activities for the coming year that you'd like to share with the audience?
Thank you so much. So this issue of age assurance is very complicated. I mean, if you look at South Africa and to the article that Amor wrote this morning, or actually published on LinkedIn, so internationally the age of consent would be between 13 and 16 or more. But if you look at South Africa, we are on 18. But when I travel with my daughter, who's 14 years old, to a different country, she would tell me to my face that, look, yeah, I've got consent, and, and you are now left to talk to her, not to contravene your rules that you've set. So it becomes very complicated and complex. So It is also how do we align the age of consent, but other jurisdictions have different age of consent, and we've got different age of consent, and we need to investigate some more. But very importantly, to Lucian's point, and to complicate matters very further, is that in the UK, they exercise the right to forget, but in the US, they said, no, we will remember you. So now, how do you ensure that that right to be forgotten is consistently applied across jurisdictions? And that's just how complicated this matter really is. But for us, as the information regulator, and through the leadership and the guidance of the chairperson, it is important for us to look at guidelines, but also we also need to see what the international community is doing, and very importantly, the international standard that needs to be there, so that we can see what is internationally acceptable, and then also see in our context if that would be compliant with our law, because our law is, even though the same, might not be, in terms of principles and the 8 conditions for lawful processing, might not be interpreted in the same way by courts. The second aspect would also be, as the CEO was saying, how do we collaborate more with our partners? And one of the key stakeholders, which is the social media providers, are not here today, but we've had extensive engagements with TikTok, for instance, and we've engaged them and told them actually where there are gaps and some concerns that we have, and they've conceded to it. But how do we consistently continue the discussion, and how do we make provision for all the partners to be under the same roof? I mean, we talk about parents, we talk about the children, we talk about concerned groups like your NGOs and stakeholders. I mean, the Teddy Bear Foundation iconic figure is here in the room. So we know that if all the stakeholders can be under one room at one single point, then we'll achieve much more, so that we get all the views and be more inclusive in the approach that we want to take. But more to the work of the information regulator, we continue to monitor the space, but what we were actually advocating for during December is that you cannot, and in all honesty, and this is the message, and I think the media is actually, we've gained some favor with the media, actually publicized the personal information of learners without their consent. And that was the message that we want to drive through. And what we continuously want to do is to conscientize and sensitize the whole of South Africa that your personal information is your property, and you have a right to consent, either through your parent or your guardian or whoever is responsible for you, or if you are at the age of majority, to actually exercise that right. And that becomes important. And the Minister of Education has actually agreed that there must be a system put in place and measures to ensure that they obtain consent. And this is one of the ways in which the information regulator is trying to make a difference and an impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think those important debates are really, really taking part truly across the world. I think that the protection of children online, I would say, is the #1 challenge for data privacy regulators across the world. And there will be more of those forums and this ability not just to talk between data protection regulators in their nice surroundings, talked among themselves, because we've seen in the past a little bit of isolation of themes. Content moderation, safety was in one room, whilst data protection regulators were in other room, versus competition regulators maybe in a third room. I think there's a much more vivid understanding that without this one roof approach, those challenges will not be addressed properly, and we'll just see the situation perpetuating. So if you look at this new initiatives that we've seen globally, code appropriate designs, UNESCO work, OECD work, all those initiatives really try to bring a multidisciplinary approach. But let me start with maybe a little bit more of a controversial question. Would you like to see similar really detailed regulations like we've heard from the Sarah earlier in South Africa? Like, would you like to have a DSA?
We'll let the lawyer come up.
It is really a measure that needs to be considered. What we also guard against is over-regulation. I mean, if you look at the debate about what the AU has introduced as the artificial intelligence regulation vis-a-vis if our law is adequate, if our law is too slow, and all of those debates, it really needs us to investigate and to see if there is appetite, if there's room, and if there's a disconnect between the current existing law and what we want to achieve. So that process needs to be thoroughly investigated, but also guarding against being too specific and being too pointy and being in a position where your work is actually to the extent over-regulating the work that you, the goal that you want to achieve. Yeah, so that would be one of the ways. How do you strike a balance, and how do you achieve a balance between what you want to achieve and also not ensuring that there are gaps in your legislation or your regulations. But very importantly, there are points that are very valid and that those can be considered. And as we are now looking at amending our legislation, it might be opportune to do the research, to do the investigations, and to see to what extent will we achieve a balance.
This is a very smart response. So you're going to look at the DSA and you're going to see how that actually works, and you're going to take the best pieces, avoid the bureaucracy, and just embellish your the South African legislation. So I think that's an approach that we see, and a little bit in terms of the regulatory sphere that many countries are not rushing into very prescriptive regulation. But counting more on co-regulation or self-regulation and observing those European very detailed legislative initiatives in the digital sphere. Any views from your side?
Yeah, I think if we look at the context and I mean where we are and the gaps that we are seeing, I think there are opportunities for the hard regulation, which is like an act itself, or the softer one, which can be regulations and guidelines. So it depends on also the issues at hand and the nature of the gaps that we are facing, and having had an assessment, like taking the best approach. So if we look, for example, in the context of education, you see that in the European context, they've developed guidelines on children's data protection in an education setting. So after the case recently on the publication of the results, I was like, I think the Information Regulator needs to come up with some sort of guidance, to look into the issue of education and data protection. Look at POPIA and say, what does POPIA mean in the education space, and what kind of guidance, it is a regulator, it should provide that kind of guidance. So I think they should come up with we have the main legislation, but stemming from the main legislation, some expanded guidance, can be drawn from there. But also I think the other challenge is that there has to be more understanding of the role of the regulator. What is the role of the regulator? Are they supposed to be fighting the regulator? Like, is there basic, really, comprehensive understanding of this institution? Why was this institution established? What is its role? And then when it comes to other departments or other institutions, what are they supposed to do in relation to POPIA itself, or in relation to, its mandate? If the Information Regulator issues, a guidance note, in terms of, issue in the context of health or context of children or on education, the stakeholders within that sector, how are they supposed to respond to that? I think there has to be more awareness and understanding of the role of the information regulator itself in relation also to other institutions that have an obligation to the bundles are disappearing to implement, as expected. So I think there is, like you're saying, the European context, they have these many, pieces of legislation. Even if you look at Australia, there are acts. The US also has some, kind of legislation. I think we need to develop culturally, regulations or guidelines that are conducive for the context on the continent, looking at our realities without really like copying and pasting, saying like we need the DSA as it is in Europe. Let's look at our context and see what works for us and what can be done.
So this is a call for action for calling to be more often present in front of cameras, which we'll very much encourage and hopefully will result from today's as well. So fantastic. I think in terms of timing, probably great to open the floor to the audience, and the Sarah as well is happy to take on questions. So we're giving the mic to the audience and looking forward. Yes, we already see 3 questions. I don't know what I'm supposed. Oh no, there's another mic over there.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
So, my name is Colin Mashile from the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. So, with regards to the DSA, I think the question, it has been considered. So, around March or May, I think the people that are still in the room will be interested and will appreciate your comments. We are going to publish a draft white paper for audiovisual services and online content, where we have a chapter dealing with protection of children online. And the issue was that in supporting the Regulators Forum, or the ICT Regulators Forum, was that the matter is running across various regulators. In terms of the information regulator will be around data issues, and FPB and ICASA will be online and offline protection of children. So we have looked at what the OECD, the G20 ministers, UNESCO, and everyone has recommended around that. And I think there's body of work around it. And also we are trying to clarify the issue of age as well in relation to what is a child and what do you do with the advertisements that they are being faced with. So I'll call that you make comments in terms of that. So with guidelines, I think guidelines were fine up until the American elections and last week's, when the tech companies, I think, realized that now they can do as they wish, and they are pulling out of a model that was working, that everyone was considering the guidelines around how they monitor misinformation, children issues and everything. And now they have said they are not obliged to do that, and they are slowly pulling out as the, and I think the posture that other countries, especially the braveness of Australia and the stand-up rightness of the European parliamentarians in terms of when they have passed the law, they said we will stand by it. I think it's very encouraging. But I think from our side, we have called for collaborative regulation. The white paper title is Innovate, Collaborate, in line with what the I2U has recommended to everyone to say there should be collaborative regulation. It's regulators, operators, the academic sector, the NGOs and everyone, so that we do a bottom-up approach to policy formulation and regulation. So I will say, please look out for it and make your own. It is going to enrich what you are trying to do today. And I think we are not very far off from what most of you are recommending. But there has been an acknowledgement that the ICT Regulators Forum, we have been calling it for a long time. And as you indicated, the Competition Commission and others will be joining in so that it's all the regulators that will say, let us avoid regulatory forum shopping by the operators and ensure that if ever we need to deal with data issues and privacy, either the new regulator or the information regulator will take it and take it to that forum. The last point, I think it's about the issue of maybe thinking that government and the operators and the regulators do not speak. I think in terms of the public open processes that we are engaged in, we invite everyone to come and speak. And in terms of regulator of the future, I think the large approach is that most of the time with children is that what is illegal offline should be also illegal online. And I think as the Deputy Minister was answering, the responsibility of protecting children, it might look bad, but I think as long as they are before 18, we have the responsibility to protect them and not compromise in terms of what we believe is right, but without cutting out the freedom of expression issues related to the operators. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So mark your calendars. There is more to come. Yes, lady in black dress. Oh, yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, the mic was closer.
Thank you very much indeed. I just wanted to remind everyone that POPIA has a extraterritorial rule in it, just the same as the GDPR has. In other words, as an Irish citizen, I could complain to the Irish regulator if my data here is being abused, I suppose, and the same.
That's
South
complicated.
Africa. It's complicated, but it's never been tried, and it should perhaps. The second issue, I just want to say to Collins, I do hope that there's not just silos here with the regulators, with ICASA, with the regulator, with the DTIC, etc. You are talking to each other, aren't you? You are cooperating between each other on these new rules. Thank you very much.
You know, the theme of regulatory collaboration is a global theme, and in Europe we will have enormous number of regulators that will have powers, even if enforcement powers in the digital sphere. And this is a big challenge for us for the coming few years, how they will work together. In the UK, there's an excellent digital cooperation forum as well, and in other parts of the world, in India, the regulators are taking the same approach, and they just realize that without talking to each other, without being privy of initiatives, and rather than competing for legislating the digital space, it will just not work. But we have a question over there.
Yes, thank you. One of the speakers earlier today had mentioned the kind of tech and information savviness of the younger generation compared to their parents. And I never thought that in 2025 we would still have people who think the earth is flat. And I think one of the larger issues is that, yes, parents are there to protect their children and are responsible for it. In South Africa, we have the particular dynamic of child-headed households that needs to be taken into consideration. But we have so much misinformation that people over the age of 18 are becoming susceptible to. People who are trained in sciences are falling for, you know, AI-created information or just things that are completely false with basic information. And so I think there is a general literacy program that is required for the general population. How do you identify misinformation? Because misinformation has always been there. The previous moderator was talking about FIMI. And we have to be, I think what we need to do is to train people on how to identify what is true and what is not, and what are people's agendas and what is not. Now we know, for example, if you have 3 high-tech people guiding the president of one of the most influential countries in the world, we're going to all have to switch on a higher sensitivity to misinformation. And there's always been misinformation, but now it's just more accessible and it's more pervasive and influential. So it's not just a thing of protecting children from misinformation or from being on the internet if the people who are protecting them are susceptible to misinformation.
I think it was mentioned this morning very clearly that it sort of requires a societal response, and I think we have enough very concrete examples of how misinformation impacts the essence of our democracies in many countries around the world. But let's go back to our topic. Let's move from this geopolitical strategic issues. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Fiso Ngobese from Basic Education, responsible for school safety. I just want to underscore some of the issues, especially around partnership, that are quite critical. We currently have the guidelines, online guidelines, and it's not just extracurricular. It's basically we are training teachers so that they are able to teach it in the classroom. We haven't reached all the provinces, all the districts in the country, but it has started. I just want to indicate that in all our engagements, we make sure that it's not just LO teachers, but colleagues in the province, colleagues in the districts that are responsible for safety, e-learning. We also have the police, because they are part of the school safety committees. We also train them. But I must indicate that in all our engagements, we always have a representative from Film and Publication Board. We also have somebody from Department of Communication and Digital Technology. So it is the partnership and also the funding. Companies are actually giving us money as a department to actually roll out this particular training. So there is work that is currently happening on the ground, and we really get the support from different companies. I thought I just should indicate that and indicate at least some kind of progress that is being done. And we are really excited by how the teachers are receiving this. They are able to align these guidelines with what the department had developed even in the past on e-safety learning in the schools. And I think what you were also touching on is quite critical, because first day of the training, we ensure that parents are there, because we understand the gaps that if teachers at school are actually going to be bringing in content, but parents at home do not have information, there's going to be a gap there. So it's a full cycle with the web rangers from Media Monitoring Africa, teaching the teachers in the classroom and subject advisors, by the way, so that we ensure that the content is continuously being transmitted across the system until, because this particular space is quite a challenge. We focus sometimes on cyberbullying, and you'll find that our learners are breaking the law. They are already on illegal betting sites. And we have never addressed those because we are focusing on something else online. So it's a fast-moving kind of platform, but we are catching up as a department. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's an optimistic note. 2 comments here. Advocate Van Stikula.
Yeah, I'm so glad that, can you hear me? Is it on? Is it on? Yes, DBE, somebody sent me this, that booklet just electronically, not the whole thing. And I hear you're talking about other people, but I haven't heard, I don't think we've been invited to that. And I see in this booklet, there's the right to privacy, protection of personal information, protection of others' personal information. And I would have thought that in putting this together, at least would have been consulted so that at least we can sort of so look at, as the custodians of POPIA, to check if what you have there, I'm not doubting that it's correct, that I'm just saying that next time, I'm hoping that on these initiatives, when you call Film and Publications and others, that you will also invite us as well to be part of that. And the colleague from Communications and Digital Technologies, the white paper that is coming, I'm also making a special appeal that the regulator should not be treated just as, you know, other people who can comment because we have to be given you know, preference, and we have to talk to you directly instead of just making a cold comment that will come to you and probably get lost in the comments that we'll receive. That we have to be deliberate to ensure that the regulators are able to give comments that will be considered. So those are my two issues. Thank you.
We just give the panel a little bit to, okay, very quick.
I think there's a hand here.
But,
yeah, she's been
Good,
raising it.
good afternoon, everybody. My name is Larato Ntwampe. I just wanted to make a comment on what Hlengiwe Dube said about the role of the media. I think I grew up in a generation where we would watch TV and these things were taught to us. I mean, I remember watching Soul Buddies, for example, which was a Soul City Institute, where would find out about some of the things that were happening around the country. And I think it's an important thing that the media also use that opportunity. The SABC used that opportunity because you see some of these programs, but you have to pay for them. You think about MTV Sugar, which actually speaks about these problems and ills that children are facing these days, being addicted to the internet, child sexual abuse material, cyberbullying. But those facilities or those shows, you have to have cable, you have to have DSTV to be able to have access to them. So I think maybe we need to go back, you know, to the drawing board in terms of media and media education and ensuring that the child in the township, you know, has access and is able to watch, you know, TV or whatever, and be able to find that, you know, find the information, because you get, as you see on TikTok, you know, anybody can upload a video and have a certain thing, but that's not accurate information. When I speak about Soul City, there were people that were involved in getting the information across. There was, you know, collaboration from government, minister of, or not minister, but the Department of Health, and the issues, the various issues that actually existed. There was collaboration in that sense. So I think sometimes we do need to go back and the role of the media in terms of educating children, educating parents, because a lot of the parents that I speak to, they don't even know what some of these things are. And I think the role of the media then, there's an opportunity there to step in and educate and ensure that there's more awareness on those programs. Thank you.
thank you. There's one question here. No? Okay.
Afternoon, I'm Amor Burger-Smith, and I just want to make a comment. It's not a question. And it emanates from a question I had in my own firm last week, where a colleague of mine posed a question to all the directors and said, how do I deal with discovery with POPIA in the background and the GDPR? And I replied to it, and half an hour later she said, oh no, don't worry, I don't need you, I quickly read up on it. Which brings me to the point that everyone nowadays, and this I can say after writing 2 textbooks, seem to be a POPI expert. And I want to make this comment in this forum in support of the Information Regulator. As the Competition Commission and the Information Regulator entered into an MOU, clearly stipulating privacy issues fall within the jurisdiction of the Information Regulator and competition issues within the ambit and jurisdiction of the Competition Commission, I strongly suggest that similar MOU should be entered into between the Department of Communication, Department of Education, because I am concerned sitting here listening to various initiatives taking place without the Information Regulator being the custodian of privacy matters in this country, being involved and commenting and partaking in that process. And for years we've seen in South Africa that this topic never got attention. And we're in a position now where we've got a very strong Information Regulator in an office doing things, reporting on aspects, taking steps, issuing enforcement notice, and now everyone seems to be a privacy expert. That's my comment.
So a very clear call for further collaboration. I think that these things don't happen in a day. They may start today, hopefully, and we see, how that requires that constant attention to collaboration and sort of work on both sides. You can read a few of the letters that were written by my compatriot Wojciech Wiewiórowski, who is the European Data Protection Supervisors, to his fellow regulators in Europe, asking for that constant collaboration and challenging them. They had very recently, a week ago, called for the digital clearinghouse as a way to address those challenges. So this is indeed a call for action that we'll discuss when we will be finishing this event. There is a question at the background, or maybe I'll let the panel comment from what you've heard and then question there.
Yeah, so on the issue of how we as information regulator would maybe look at guidelines, look at guidance notes, it's a very structured approach. So you'll find the Act, and from the Act, you get your regulations. From the regulations, you'll get guidelines, which is prescribed, and then you'll get your guidance notes, which is something you could consider. And that now speaks to Sihlengiwe's issue about how do we close the gaps and if there is a gap. But it's basically how the information regulator is interpreting legislation, but it's not binding when it comes to the guidelines. And then there's codes of conduct for industries, and that now is binding. But very importantly, there needs to be an approach to say, and it's always the approach of the regulator, top down. If it's not in our legislation, we cannot maybe just force it. It needs to be in some high-level legislation and then a little bit of more detail in the regulations, and then you get your guideline, which is slightly more detailed than your regulation, and then you get your guidance that informs actually a specific topic or puts some more context to it. So that's basically how we operate at the information regulator when we approach a specific gap or vacuum or try to bring some clarity to the general public.
Okay. The question in the back.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Malitola Matube. My company is Iketsetse Bokamoso. I'm the advocate of people with disabilities, children, and women. So we normally focus a lot on townships, rural areas, and informal settlements because they don't have this type of forums. Specifically, we say, how do we pull these type of forums into our townships, rural areas, and informal settlements earlier on, because what we've noticed is that they are always the last ones to be included. So I would plead in this forum, I offer myself to be included, to make sure that when we have these conversations, we have representatives that are from those areas right early from the beginning, so that we can deal with the lot of social ills that we are seeing in these communities. In these communities, we get brilliant kids, brilliant youth, brilliant children, but because of the exclusion, they only know only the social ills that are in those communities. As a result, they then just decay. It becomes a vicious cycle that you are not able to control. Thank you very much.
I will share a little bit of a personal experience here. So on Saturday, on my day 2, I had the privilege to visit Soweto, and I had the chat while I was buying my bottle of water in those really nice little township shops. I had a chat with a young gentleman who was showing me his TikTok account with some dancing, and I started to have a chat about, the privacy aspects. And he was actually very savvy, and he said, no, I'm doing this but I truly agree that, yes, of course, that has to be for everybody. That has to be for everybody. And I think that being from the global north, we do not experience the same level of, huge differences in terms of digital inclusion and digital literacy.
Okay, thank you. And just a last point. So we have a summit that we've started called Itlankoval Africa Day Summit, where we're trying to get the international community into the VAL. As you know, it's one of the communities that are very excluded. So that's another forum that we could use where we can have a masterclass in that summit to ensure that we include people from the rural areas, informal settlement, and the townships. Thank you very much. I'll be in touch with the people that organize this forum. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think this is
the end of applause.
This is the best way to end this panel. Please join me in a round of applause for our panelists online and in the room. Over to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Monica, and the panelists. We are moving towards closing this session. However, I'm going to invite the chairperson of the regulator. There's a statement that has been prepared, which is called a joint statement on common international approach to age assurance. And you are invited, all the stakeholders who are here, who are willing, or who have a mandate, if we put it politically, to sign that statement arising out of today's session. Thank you. Chair.
Thank you very much. We're going to do this quite quickly. The pen has fallen. To mark the International Data Privacy Day, the Information Regulator of South Africa will join 10 other data protection authorities globally that have signed on to the joint statement on the common international approach to age assurance, called the joint statement. By signing on to the joint statement, the regulator seeks to strengthen its efforts at protecting the children's rights to privacy and the protection of their personal information. The regulator fully endorses the key shared principles set out by the signatories, as these principles provide guidance to industry on signatories' shared expectations on age assurance practices as it relates to data protection and privacy of children. As the statement indicates, and I quote, age assurance can be used to protect people, and particularly children, from harms arising from the processing of their personal information online, and ensure this information is not used to serve children content they are too young to access. Additionally, in cases where the processing of children's data is specifically forbidden, age assurance can help organizations meet their legal obligations, close quote. We hope these principles in the joint statement will inform conversations between us as the regulator and service providers, especially those that are global but have a presence in South Africa, around consistency and fairness in the design and operation of digital platforms in relation to protection of privacy. The principles are essential in ensuring a high level of user privacy, especially for children. It is my honor to sign the joint statement on behalf of the regulator, and so I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. Now I'm inviting the CEO of the regulator to give closing remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know I am standing between your going home and you're standing here, you're being here, you want to go home, you're thinking about the traffic, you're thinking about your children, you're thinking about many things. So I'm not going to be that bad person who blocks you from going home because I'm an old man, I no longer have children. They're old, they're looking after their own children. So as an old man, I won't be wasting your time. Nomzamo sent me a whole lot of things that she typed for me. And as an old teacher, I have decided just to summarize them. So I will still communicate those things to yourselves. The issues that have come out of this important engagement today, firstly, is the issue of partnerships. But I think partnerships in themselves, and when you just talk about them without structuring them, mean nothing. And what is clear is that we talk about partnerships, but they're not structured. I think within the regulator, chair and members, we need to find some place in our planning, in our either operational plan, strategic plan, to start to structure partnerships so that we are deliberate on how we deal with partnerships. As we talk, everyone is saying we are doing this, we are doing it, we are calling for partnership, but I don't think they are structured. And I don't think they will take us anywhere if they are not structured. So I'm saying that out of here, I think we need to go and work on partnership and structure them properly. So are collaborations. Collaborations that happen by accident are also dangerous collaborations. Because, you may be finding yourself running away from the police and you collaborate on hiding from the police, and then it's a dangerous collaboration. I think the one roof approach that was spoken about here is what we should also go and work on. That we really try by all means to be in one roof and talk about these issues, and not just on important dates like this one. But as we implement, we need to find ourselves and collaborate more. And collaboration is not just about talking. It's about sharing of resources, be they financial, material, any resources that you can share. So it's important that we have one roof approach on collaborations. Then the legal reforms. We'll try, people have tried over time to throw legal reforms at problems. They're never going to assist us to change everything adequately. We need to do root cause analysis of what our problems are and not rush and say there must be legal reforms. They're important. We will look at them. We are looking at to amend POPIA and POPIA. We'll keep on doing that work. But we'll keep on changing legislation because we've not really done a diagnostic on what is our real problem. And we need to do root cause analysis of what is the real problem. And as a teacher of 17 years, and I'm now no longer a teacher, and I've worked for 42 years, and I'm about to retire. I normally tell colleagues that I'm going in a year's time, and I tell them that I'll be away, and they'll be on their own. I think the issue is we leave out important stakeholders when we do everything that we do. The problems that we are talking about today, where parents, learners, teachers, and society is in danger, have always been there. It's just that the risk is different. They've always, there was a time when we worried about girls' pregnancy at schools. There was a time when we worried about gangsterism. There was a time when we worried about use of pornography. There was a time when we worried about many other things. Today it's a different problem, but the problems have always been there. The problem is we leave important stakeholders out of the conversations. We meet together, we think we have the solutions, and we think that our important stakeholders will automatically participate. And I think we need to correct that, to deal with this problem that's facing us today. And parents an important stakeholder. And it's not entirely accurate to think that parents do not know IT, because parents, if I'm an old man, if I'm a grandfather, and if the chairperson is a grandmother, who are parents? Parents are my children. And they're into technology. They know and understand technology. So the problem is not that they don't. The problem is, are they committed to taking a journey of fixing the problems that are facing society? And they're not. That's the problem. The problem is not that they do not know IT and technology. They have it. If my father could use a phone, then all of us can use phones. Because my father was never at a classroom. He had to leave school at age 7. He went for a few months, and then he had to go and look after the cattle and the sheep. But before his death, he could phone us. He could use a phone. So the parent that you are referring to is not that ignorant. It's not that naive. It's unwilling. And maybe that's the issue we need to address, and not that they should know technology. So it's an important stakeholder that we need to think about as we plan the way forward. The learners themselves. I think we want to say to them that they are not safe. When they are aware that they are not safe, they are aware that there are dangers. I think the problem is, do we monitor enough? Because they are aware sometimes. They get into these things and they look at them. Even these children of 13 years, of 12 years, they are aware they get into them. But do we monitor? Do we have enough monitoring of these things? So protection does not come with just people being aware. It comes also being monitored. Can you imagine if we do not have the defense force, the police, the intelligence in a country, and you say South Africans are free, are aware? You still need that monitoring because the threat is still out there. So you cannot leave monitoring out of the equation and think that children are not aware. So I'm saying we need to go to the root cause of problems and address those root causes. And lastly, I want to talk about teachers in these stakeholders. We have left teachers out. And as a teacher of 17 years, we write things in Pretoria for them when they are in Umtata. We go to universities, and pardon to professors are here. We allow professors to develop material about situations in schools without involving teachers who are going to teach these subjects. And we go and impose them on teachers. Many years when I was trained as a teacher, we were taught 17 subjects. 17, you needed to pass 17 subjects. One of the subjects was child psychology. You needed, before you teach a child, to understand child psychology, how children develop from this age, what happens to them, what is, and if you have got teachers who are trained, and you develop a program for teachers who are in Pretoria, you impose it that they implement it. It's going to be difficult for them because they know how to go about that because they're trained as teachers. So this is such an important stakeholder who are living out of this conversation, and we need to do that. Society is important. Collectively as a society, we need to begin to take collective responsibility for the ills that are in society. This kind of problem we're dealing with it. It's not a problem of just households. It's a societal problem of values, of elderly people behaving like their children sometimes, not all of them. And children thinking that they're cool when they see them behaving like that. And there are societal values that we need to deal with and correct these things in society. The last point is what Martin Luther King Jr. said when he said, it is dangerous to sleep in the middle of a revolution. He says, a man goes up a mountain, he set up a house in a mountain, and on his way to that mountain, he see a board written the name of a president of America. And he went on the mountain for a number of years, he slept there. And when he woke up and came back, he found America different, having gone through a revolution, a different America, and that's what has happened to all of us. We've really slept in the middle of a revolution that faced us. From as early as the 60s, when computers started being part of our lives, that was a mark of a revolution that would culminate into where we are today. And throughout during this revolution, we just slept. We are now awake. Maybe we should not sleep during and think this is the end. Maybe this is the mark of another revolution. Maybe the end of this is the beginning of another revolution. And we need our researchers, our ICT people, CIO. We need the educated staff, the tech people to tell us what is going to happen in the next 40 years, given what we see, to predict, to project, and tell us what is going to happen in the next 40 years. So as the information regulator, we're saying there's a duty to the Constitution. We're saying what Professor Snail said, that in doing our work, we must remember there's chapter 2 of this Constitution, which talks about human rights. The other chapters talk about the power of the state. But our Constitution is different in giving us chapter 2 that protects human rights. And as the information regulator was saying, when we stand up and say, we're not happy with this, we're not happy with that, we have this duty to chapter 2 of the Constitution. I thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Monica.
I can say sort of me again. But usually in sort of Privacy Day conferences, the last person to talk says, I'm standing between you and drinks, whilst I'm standing between you and traffic, which I think it's a very different way to conclude this very fruitful day. I hope you have enjoyed. I found the discussions fascinating, with a phenomenal energy in the room and a lot of promise for future joint collaboration, for bringing people along, like you've just said, to think about those that are not in this room, to also for our future conversations, that they will be included and they will have a voice. And we've heard a lot of pleas for hearing the voices of various stakeholders that have an important role to play. So I'll not keep you for longer. On behalf of Naspers and Process, I would like to thank you for your participation. I also represent, I have the honor to serve on the board of the International Privacy Association, and we also are working very hard on the ability to address the needs of various professionals that encounter those digital challenges in their paths. And so you'll hear more about that. I hope to be back sooner than later and have the pleasure to interact, and I hope that our collaboration was not one of those dangerous collaborations, but rather the beginning of a fruitful one. Thank you very much, everyone.
On behalf of the regulator, I want to express our gratitude to the following people: the Minister of Basic Education and the Deputy Minister,